Welcome to another video on stories of our history. Imagine a building that is not just a place of worship, but a three-dimensional puzzle, a stone library carved with a vocabulary of symbols so dense and so enigmatic that they have defied definitive interpretation for over 550 years. This is Rosslyn Chapel, officially known as the Collegiate Church of St. Matthew, standing on a gentle rise above the River North Esk in the village of Rosslyn, 7 miles south of Edinburgh, Scotland. From the outside, it is a modest, almost unfinished-looking church of honey-colored sandstone, its buttresses soaring against the grey Scottish sky. But step inside, and you are immediately enveloped in a riot of carving, a dense tapestry of biblical narratives, pagan deities, knights in armor, plants, animals, and geometric patterns that cover nearly every square inch of the interior surfaces. The effect is overwhelming, a visual symphony of stone that has been described as one of the most beautiful and mysterious buildings in the entire world. It is a place that seems to whisper secrets, to invite the visitor to decode its hidden messages, and to promise a revelation that is always just beyond reach. Rosslyn Chapel was built between 1446 and 1486 by Sir William Sinclair, the third and final Prince of Orkney, a man of immense wealth, power, and ambition. The Sinclair family was of Norman descent, and they had been granted lands in Scotland in the 12th century by King David I. They were staunch supporters of Robert the Bruce during the Wars of Scottish Independence, and they had a long and documented connection to the Knights Templar, serving as the hereditary protectors of the Order's lands in Midlothian after the Templar dissolution in 1312. Sir William Sinclair, the builder of Rosslyn, intended his chapel to be the crowning glory of his family, a collegiate church where priests would pray for the souls of his ancestors and a mausoleum where the Sinclair lords would be buried in their full armor. But the chapel he built was far more than a simple family chapel. It was a statement of esoteric knowledge, a testament to the secret traditions that the Sinclairs had inherited from the Templars, and a monumental puzzle that would tantalize future generations. The construction of Rosslyn Chapel was an act of extraordinary piety and architectural ambition. Sir William Sinclair spared no expense in the building of his church. He imported master masons from France, Germany, and Italy, paying them handsomely for their labor. According to the Chronicle of Father Hay, an 18th-century historian of the Sinclair family, Sir William built the village of Rosslyn to house the masons, and he brought in stone from quarries as far away as Fife and Northumberland. The masons were given a free hand to create, and the result was a masterpiece of late Gothic architecture that blended the Scottish, French, and Italian styles into a unique and harmonious whole. The chapel was originally intended to be a much larger cruciform building, with a nave, a choir, and a transept, but only the choir and the Lady Chapel were completed before Sir William's death in 1484. His son, Sir Oliver Sinclair, lacked his father's vision and his wealth, and the grand design was never finished. What remains is a fragment, a glorious, tantalizing fragment of a dream. The layout of Rosslyn Chapel is, on the surface, a simple rectangle, measuring approximately 68 feet long by 35 feet wide. But this simple exterior conceals a complex and highly symbolic interior. The chapel is divided into 5 bays by a series of pillars and arches, with a central aisle leading to the altar at the east end. The floor plan, when carefully measured, reveals a startling secret. It is a precise copy of the plan of the Temple of Solomon in Jerusalem, as described in the Book of Kings and the Book of Chronicles, and as reconstructed by the medieval Templars and the later Freemasons. The dimensions of the chapel, the proportions of the pillars, and the alignment of the walls all correspond to the biblical description of the temple, the sacred building that was the dwelling place of the Ark of the Covenant and the Holy of Holies. Rosslyn Chapel, in its very layout, is a symbolic recreation of the lost temple, a stone prayer that the sacred mysteries would one day be restored. The carvings of Rosslyn Chapel are its most famous and most baffling feature. The interior of the chapel is a riot of stone imagery, a visual encyclopedia of the medieval mind. There are scenes from the Old Testament, the fall of man, the expulsion from Eden, the sacrifice of Isaac, and Moses receiving the law on Mount Sinai. There are scenes from the New Testament, the Nativity, the Crucifixion, the Resurrection, and the Ascension. There are depictions of the 7 deadly sins and the 7 virtues, the dance of death, and the Last Judgment. But alongside these Orthodox Christian images, there are carvings that seem to belong to a very different tradition: pagan deities, the green man, dragons, and a host of enigmatic symbols that have never been fully explained. The chapel is a fusion of the sacred and the profane, the Christian and the pagan, the historical and the mythical, a stone tapestry that weaves together the many strands of the medieval world. The Sinclair family, who built Rosslyn, were the hereditary patrons of the Scottish Templars, and the chapel is saturated with Templar symbolism. The cross petit, the distinctive symbol of the Knights Templar, is carved on the walls, the ceiling, and the tombs. The Lamb of God, the Agnus Dei, which was the central emblem of the Templar seal, appears in several places. The figures of knights in armor, which are carved on the pillars and the arches, are believed to represent the Templar martyrs who died in the Holy Land. The floor of the chapel, which is laid out in a pattern of black and white squares, is a classic Templar and Masonic symbol, representing the duality of good and evil, light and darkness. The chapel is a monument to the Templar legacy, a stone testament to the secret alliance between the Sinclairs and the warrior monks. The builders of Rosslyn Chapel, the master masons who carved the stone, were members of a secretive and highly skilled craft. The medieval stonemasons' guilds were the forerunners of modern Freemasonry, and they had their own rituals, symbols, and passwords, which were passed down from master to apprentice. The masons who built Rosslyn were undoubtedly initiates of this esoteric tradition, and they encoded their secret knowledge into the very stones of the chapel. The 3 principal pillars at the east end of the chapel, the master pillar, the journeyman pillar, and the apprentice pillar, are a direct reference to the 3 degrees of Freemasonry: entered apprentice, fellow craft, and master mason. The legend of the apprentice pillar, which tells the story of a murdered apprentice and a jealous master, is a Masonic parable about the value of skill, the danger of pride, and the supreme importance of secrecy. The most famous and controversial carvings in Rosslyn Chapel are the ones that appear to depict plants that are native to the Americas: the maize cob and the aloe vera. These carvings, which are located on the arches of the Lady Chapel, were executed in the mid-15th century, decades before Christopher Columbus made his first voyage to the New World in 1492. The presence of these plants has sparked a firestorm of debate among historians, botanists, and conspiracy theorists. How could a medieval Scottish mason have known about plants that grew only on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean? The answer, according to the believers in the Templar Sinclair theory, is that the Sinclairs possessed secret knowledge of the Americas, knowledge that had been brought back by a pre-Columbian voyage led by Prince Henry Sinclair in 1398. A voyage that was based on the Old Norse routes and perhaps on maps that the Templars had acquired in the Holy Land. The maize and aloe carvings are not the only evidence that the builders of Rosslyn had knowledge that was ahead of their time. The ceiling of the chapel is covered with hundreds of carved stars, arranged in a pattern that has been interpreted as a celestial map, a representation of the heavens at a particular moment in time. The music boxes, a series of carved cubes that protrude from the arches, have been decoded by a team of musicians and code breakers as a musical score, a piece of medieval music that was frozen in stone. The green man, a folate head that appears in over 100 variations throughout the chapel, is a symbol of the life force, a pagan deity of fertility and rebirth that was adopted by the medieval church. Rosslyn Chapel is a book of secrets, a stone library that was designed to preserve knowledge that could not be written down in books, knowledge that had to be hidden in plain sight. The crypt of Rosslyn Chapel, which lies beneath the main floor, is the ultimate locked room of the Templar mystery. The crypt is sealed, and it has never been excavated, despite the pleas of countless researchers and treasure hunters. The Sinclair family has always refused to allow an excavation, a decision that has only fueled the legends. According to the most persistent tradition, the crypt contains the bodies of the Sinclair lords, buried in their full armor, just as the Templar knights were buried in the Holy Land. But the crypt is also believed by many to contain the Holy Grail, the cup of the Last Supper, which the Templars brought from Jerusalem. Others believe it holds the Ark of the Covenant, the gold-plated chest that contained the tablets of the 10 Commandments. Still others believe it holds the mummified head of Jesus Christ, the Baphomet, that the Templars were accused of worshipping. The crypt of Rosslyn is the holy of holies of the esoteric tradition, a sacred space that has been waiting for centuries to be opened. The historical context of the building of Rosslyn Chapel is essential for understanding its meaning and its purpose. The mid-15th century was a period of relative peace and prosperity for Scotland, a golden age between the wars of independence and the chaos of the Reformation. The Stuart kings, James I and James II, were consolidating their power and building a Renaissance court. The Scottish Church was wealthy and influential, and the great abbeys and cathedrals were centers of learning and culture. It was in this atmosphere of confidence and creativity that Sir William Sinclair, the third Prince of Orkney, decided to build his family's chapel. He was a man of the Renaissance, a patron of the arts, a collector of books, and a student of the esoteric sciences. His library, according to the chronicler Father Hay, was one of the finest in Scotland, and it contained works on alchemy, astrology, and the Kabbalah. Rosslyn Chapel was the product of a brilliant and curious mind, a mind that was eager to explore the hidden dimensions of reality. The Sinclair family's connection to the Templars was not a matter of distant legend, it was a matter of documented history. The Sinclairs had been granted the lands of Ballantradoch, the principal Templar commandery in Scotland, after the dissolution of the order. They had inherited the Templar estates, the Templar traditions, and, according to their own family history, the Templar treasure. The Sinclairs were the hereditary Grand Masters of the Masonic Lodges of Scotland, a title that was granted to them by King James II in 1441, just 5 years before the construction of Rosslyn began. The Scottish Masons, who were the direct descendants of the medieval stonemasons' guilds, had a deep and abiding connection to the Templar myth. They believed that their craft had been brought to Scotland by the Templar refugees, who had preserved the secret wisdom of Solomon's Temple and had encoded it in the rituals and symbols of Freemasonry. Rosslyn Chapel was the physical embodiment of this Masonic Templar tradition, a temple of initiation that was built by the heirs of the temple. The design and construction of Rosslyn Chapel was a collaborative effort between the patron, Sir William Sinclair, and the master masons who executed his vision. The names of the individual masons have been lost to history, but their work survives, a testament to their skill and their devotion. The masons were not just laborers. They were artists and initiates, men who understood the symbolic language of their craft. They carved the stones not just with their hands, but with their minds and their spirits, infusing every detail with layers of meaning. The process of carving the intricate designs was a form of meditation, a spiritual exercise that allowed the mason to connect with the divine. The chapel, in this sense, is not just a building, it is a prayer, a song, a poem written in stone. The materials used in the construction of Rosslyn Chapel were carefully chosen for their symbolic and aesthetic qualities. The stone is a fine-grained, honey-colored sandstone that was quarried from a nearby site. It is a soft stone, easy to carve but also susceptible to weathering, which is why the exterior of the chapel has been so badly eroded over the centuries. The interior, protected from the wind and rain, has retained its crisp, sharp detail, a testament to the skill of the masons who knew exactly how to work the material. The roof of the chapel was originally covered with lead, and the windows were filled with stained glass, which would have bathed the interior in a kaleidoscope of colored light. The effect, when the chapel was first completed, must have been stunning, a jewel box of light and stone that would have taken the breath away. The iconography of Rosslyn Chapel is a fusion of Christian, pagan, and esoteric traditions. The Christian imagery is the most visible and the most abundant. The life of Christ, the Virgin Mary, the Apostles, and the saints are all depicted in loving detail. But alongside these orthodox images, there are carvings that seem to belong to a much older, pre-Christian world. The green man, the foliate head that symbolizes the life force of nature, appears over and over again, peering out from the leaves and the vines. The dragons, which were symbols of chaos and evil in Christian tradition, are also symbols of wisdom and power in the Celtic and Norse traditions. The pentagram, a five-pointed star that was a symbol of protection in the medieval period, appears on several of the pillars. The chapel is a syncretic masterpiece, a place where the old gods and the new god were brought together in a single, harmonious vision. The role of women in the iconography of Rosslyn Chapel is particularly noteworthy. The Lady Chapel, which is located at the east end of the church, is dedicated to the Virgin Mary, and it contains some of the most beautiful and delicate carvings in the entire building. The figure of Mary, who is venerated as the Mother of God, is a symbol of the sacred feminine, a principle that was often suppressed in the patriarchal medieval church. The Sheila na gig, a crude carving of a female figure exposing her genitals, which appears on the outside wall of the chapel, is a powerful and shocking image of female fertility and power. The presence of these contrasting images of the feminine, the pure virgin and the earthly Sheila na gig, is a reminder that the medieval mind was capable of holding complex and contradictory ideas about women, sexuality, and the divine. The Dance of Death, which is carved on the walls of the Lady Chapel, is one of the most famous and haunting images in Rosslyn. The Dance of Death was a popular theme in medieval art, a reminder that death comes for everyone, rich and poor, young and old, king and peasant alike. The Rosslyn Dance of Death shows a series of figures: a king, a queen, a bishop, a knight, a maiden, a child, each being led away by a grinning skeleton. The carving is a memento mori, a reminder of the transience of life and the vanity of earthly glory. But it is also a message of hope. The figures are not resisting, they are dancing, a sign that they have accepted their fate and are ready to meet their maker. The Dance of Death is a profound meditation on the human condition, a stone sermon on the meaning of life and death. The 7 deadly sins and the 7 virtues, which are carved on the pillars of the nave, are another example of the moral and didactic purpose of the chapel. The sins, pride, greed, wrath, envy, lust, gluttony, and sloth, are depicted as monstrous figures, their faces twisted in agony. The virtues, humility, charity, patience, kindness, chastity, temperance, and diligence, are depicted as serene and beautiful figures, their hands raised in blessing. The carvings are a visual catechism, a lesson in Christian ethics that could be understood by the illiterate as well as the learned. The chapel, in this sense, was a book for the unlettered, a stone Bible that told the story of salvation through the power of imagery. The astronomical and astrological symbolism of Rosslyn Chapel is a subject that has attracted the attention of researchers and code breakers. The ceiling of the chapel is covered with hundreds of carved stars, arranged in a pattern that has been interpreted as a celestial map, a representation of the heavens at the time of the chapel's construction. The positions of the stars, the phases of the moon, and the signs of the zodiac are all thought to be encoded in the stone. The alignment of the chapel, which is oriented to the east, the direction of the rising sun, is a reflection of the Christian belief in the resurrection, but it also echoes the ancient practice of aligning sacred buildings with the solstices and equinoxes. The Rosslyn Chapel, in this reading, is an observatory of the soul, a place where the microcosm of the human being is aligned with the macrocosm of the heavens. The apprentice pillar is, without doubt, the most famous and most celebrated single feature of Rosslyn Chapel. It stands at the southeast corner of the choir, a twisted column of stone that rises from the floor to the vaulted ceiling, carved with a profusion of vines, dragons, and human figures. The pillar is a masterpiece of the stonemason's art, a tour de force of technical skill and artistic imagination. According to the legend, the master mason who was building the chapel had gone to Rome to study the original pillar from which his design was taken. While he was away, his apprentice, a young man of exceptional talent, had a dream in which he saw a vision of a beautiful pillar. He carved the pillar himself, and it was so magnificent that it surpassed anything the master had ever done. When the master returned and saw what the apprentice had achieved, he was consumed by jealousy. In a fit of rage, he struck the apprentice on the head with a mallet and killed him. The apprentice pillar is a memorial to the murdered boy, a monument to genius, and a cautionary tale about the destructive power of envy. The apprentice pillar is not just a beautiful object, it is a deeply symbolic one. The pillar is carved with a spiral of vines and leaves, which are said to represent the tree of life, the central symbol of the Jewish Kabbalah. The tree of life is a diagram of the 10 Sephiroth, the emanations of the divine, and it is a map of the spiritual path that the soul must follow to return to its source. The dragons that are carved at the base of the pillar are the guardians of the tree, the forces of chaos and evil that must be overcome by the initiate. The human figures that are carved among the vines are the souls of the righteous, who are climbing the tree toward the divine light. The apprentice pillar, in this reading, is a Kabbalistic meditation in stone, a tool for spiritual contemplation that was designed by the Masonic initiates who built the chapel. The master pillar and the journeyman pillar, which stand at the northeast and northwest corners of the choir, are the companions to the apprentice pillar. The master pillar is a perfectly proportioned column, carved with a simple, elegant design. It represents the master mason, the highest degree of the Masonic craft, who has achieved a state of wisdom and harmony. The journeyman pillar, which is also known as the pillar of beauty, is carved with a more elaborate design, representing the fellow craft, the intermediate degree, who is still on the path of learning. The three pillars together represent the 3 degrees of Freemasonry, and they are a visual representation of the Masonic system of initiation. The pillars are the symbolic heart of Rosslyn Chapel, the core around which the entire building is organized. The legend of the apprentice pillar has a deep resonance with the Masonic myth of Hiram Abiff, the architect of Solomon's Temple. In the Masonic tradition, Hiram Abiff was the master mason who was responsible for the construction of the temple. He was murdered by 3 ruffians who tried to force him to reveal the secret word of a master mason. Hiram refused, and he was killed by blows to the head, just like the apprentice in the Rosslyn legend. The story of Hiram Abiff is the central myth of Freemasonry, a parable about the value of fidelity, the necessity of secrecy, and the hope of resurrection. The apprentice pillar is a Masonic monument, a stone retelling of the Hiramic legend that was designed to instruct and inspire the initiates of the craft. The music boxes, the series of carved cubes that protrude from the arches of the Lady Chapel, are another of Rosslyn's unsolved mysteries. The cubes are carved with a variety of geometric patterns, circles, triangles, stars, and flowers. For centuries, their meaning was a puzzle. Then, in 2007, a team of musicians and code breakers, led by Thomas Mitchell and his son Stuart, announced that they had cracked the code. The patterns on the cubes, they argued, are not just decorative, they are a musical score. The patterns correspond to the vibrations of sound, and when they are decoded, they produce a piece of music, a haunting medieval melody that has been named the Rosslyn Motet. The music boxes, in this interpretation, are a frozen song, a hymn that was carved into the stone for future generations to discover. The discovery of the Rosslyn Motet was a sensation, and it sparked a renewed interest in the chapel's secrets. The melody, when played, is a simple but beautiful piece of music, a kyrie or a prayer for mercy. It is a direct link to the medieval mind, a sound that has been silent for over 500 years. The music boxes are a testament to the ingenuity of the Masons, who are able to encode a complex piece of information in a visual form. They are also a reminder that the chapel was not just a visual experience, it was a multi-sensory environment, a place where the eyes, the ears, and the spirit were all engaged in the act of worship. The Rosslyn Motet is the voice of the stones, a song that was waiting to be sung. The green man, the foliate head that appears in over 100 variations throughout the chapel, is one of the most ancient and most universal symbols in human culture. The green man is a face that is made of leaves, or a face that is peering out from a mass of foliage. He is a symbol of the life force, the spirit of the natural world, the god of vegetation and rebirth. The green man has his roots in the pre-Christian religions of Europe, in the cults of the forest gods and the earth goddesses. He was adopted by the medieval church as a symbol of the resurrection, a reminder that life emerges from death, that spring follows winter, and that the soul is reborn into eternal life. The green man of Rosslyn is a bridge between the old faith and the new, a silent witness to the enduring power of the pagan spirit. The sheer number and variety of green men in Rosslyn Chapel is astonishing. They are everywhere, on the pillars, on the arches, on the ceiling, and on the tombs. Some are smiling, some are grimacing, some are youthful, and some are ancient. They are a crowd of silent watchers, a congregation of nature spirits who have come to witness the sacred rites. The green man is the genius loci, the spirit of the place, a reminder that Rosslyn Chapel is not just a building, but a sacred grove, a place where the veil between the natural and the supernatural worlds is thin. The green man is the guardian of the chapel's deepest secret, that the divine is present in all things, in the stone and the wood, in the leaf and the flower, in the human heart and the human mind. The maize and aloe carvings are the single most controversial and hotly debated feature of Rosslyn Chapel. The carvings are located on the arches of the Lady Chapel, and they depict what appear to be a cob of Indian corn, or maize, and a plant with fleshy leaves and a flower spike that looks remarkably like an aloe vera. The carvings were executed in the mid-15th century, decades before Christopher Columbus's first voyage to the Americas in 1492. Maize is a plant that is native to the New World, and it was unknown in Europe before Columbus's return. Aloe vera is also a plant that is native to the Americas, as well as to Africa and the Middle East. The presence of these plants at Rosslyn has been used as evidence by those who believe that the Sinclairs had knowledge of the Americas before Columbus, knowledge that was brought back by a pre-Columbian voyage led by Prince Henry Sinclair in 1398. The skeptics, however, have offered a variety of alternative explanations for the maize and aloe carvings. Some have argued that the maize is not maize at all, but a stylized representation of a European plant, such as a sheaf of wheat or a stalk of barley. The aloe, they argue, is not an aloe vera, but a European plant, such as a houseleek or a sea holly. The wear and tear of the centuries, the Victorian restoration that was carried out in the 19th century, and the fact that the carvings are high up on the arches and difficult to see, have all contributed to the confusion. It is possible, the skeptics argue, that what we are seeing is not an accurate botanical representation of a New World plant, but a stylized, symbolic representation of a European plant that has been misinterpreted by overeager conspiracy theorists. The 19th century restoration of Rosslyn Chapel is a crucial factor in evaluating the authenticity of the carvings. In the 1860s, the chapel was in a state of serious disrepair. The roof was leaking, the stonework was crumbling, and many of the carvings had been damaged by the weather. A major restoration was undertaken by the architect David Bryce, who was commissioned by the Earl of Rosslyn to repair and restore the chapel. Bryce's restoration was thorough and extensive. He replaced many of the damaged stones, recarved many of the worn carvings, and added a number of new features, including the baptistry and the organ loft. The restoration was a necessary act of conservation, but it also introduced a layer of 19th century interpretation that can make it difficult to distinguish the original 15th century work from the Victorian editions. The specific question of whether the maize and aloe carvings are original or Victorian is a matter of ongoing debate. The carvings are located on the arches of the Lady Chapel, which were heavily restored by David Bryce. The original stonework in this area was badly eroded, and many of the carvings had to be recut. It is possible that the original 15th century carvings were of European plants, and that the Victorian masons, working with damaged and indistinct originals, inadvertently created the maize and aloe shapes that we see today. Alternatively, it is possible that the Victorian masons deliberately carved the New World plants, either as a hoax or as a tribute to the Sinclair legend. The truth is that we simply do not know for certain whether the carvings are original or Victorian, and the debate is likely to continue until new evidence is discovered. The Sinclair legend of a pre-Columbian voyage to the New World is the foundation of the theory that the maize and aloe carvings are authentic. According to this legend, which is based on the controversial Zeno narrative, a 16th century Venetian document, Prince Henry Sinclair, the grandfather of the builder of Rosslyn, led an expedition to the New World in 1398, nearly a century before Columbus. Sinclair, who was the Earl of Orkney and a vassal of the Norwegian king, is said to have followed the Old Norse routes across the Atlantic, landing in what is now Nova Scotia. The expedition was led by the Venetian navigator Antonio Zeno, and it included a contingent of Templar knights who had found refuge in Scotland after the dissolution of their order. The purpose of the voyage was to establish a new colony, a New Jerusalem, in a land that was far from the reach of the European powers. The evidence for the Sinclair voyage is, at best, fragmentary and controversial. The Zeno narrative, which is the primary source, is a document of dubious authenticity, filled with geographical inaccuracies and anachronisms. The archaeological evidence for a 14th century European presence in Nova Scotia is sparse and disputed. The Westford Knight, a carving on a glacial boulder in Massachusetts that some believe depicts a medieval knight, is generally regarded by mainstream archaeologists as a natural geological formation or a Native American petroglyph. The Newport Tower in Rhode Island, a circular stone structure that has been claimed as a Templar church, has been carbon dated to the 17th century. The Sinclair legend, in the view of most historians, is a romantic myth, a product of the 19th century fascination with the Templars and the lost worlds of the past. Yet, the legend persists, and it has been the inspiration for countless books, films, and expeditions. The idea that the Sinclairs, the heirs of the Templars, reached the New World before Columbus is a powerful and appealing one. It suggests that the discovery of America was not a single event, but a gradual process, a series of voyages by different peoples over many centuries. The maize and aloe carvings at Rosslyn, whether they are authentic or not, are the physical symbols of this legend, the stone witnesses to a dream of a new world that was born in the midst of the medieval past. The carvings are a challenge to the conventional narrative of history, a question that has been carved in stone and that demands an answer. The crypt of Rosslyn Chapel is the ultimate mystery of the building, a sealed space that has been the focus of intense speculation and legend for centuries. The crypt is located beneath the main floor of the chapel, and it is accessed by a staircase that descends from the nave. The entrance to the crypt is blocked by a heavy stone slab, and it has never been formally excavated or opened by archaeologists. The Sinclair family, who are the hereditary guardians of the chapel, have always refused to allow an excavation, citing the sanctity of the family burials and the need to preserve the structural integrity of the building. This steadfast refusal has only fueled the legends, and the crypt has become, in the popular imagination, the final resting place of the Holy Grail, the Ark of the Covenant, or the lost scrolls of the Temple of Solomon. The tradition that the crypt contains the bodies of the Sinclair lords, buried in their full armor, is a matter of family history. According to the Chronicle of Father Hay, the Sinclairs were interred in the crypt in a ritual that echoed the burial customs of the Templars. The knights were laid to rest in their armor, with their swords by their sides and their helmets on their heads, as if they were ready to rise and fight at the Last Judgment. The crypt, in this tradition, is a sacred mausoleum, a hall of heroes where the warriors of the clan await the final call. The refusal to open the crypt is an act of piety, a respect for the dead that overrides the curiosity of the living. The Holy Grail, the Cup of the Last Supper, is the most famous of the legendary treasures that are said to be hidden in the Rosslyn crypt. The Grail legend, which was fused with the Templar myth in the medieval romances, tells the story of a sacred vessel that was brought to Britain by Joseph of Arimathea. The Templars, according to the Esoteric tradition, were the guardians of the Grail, and they brought it with them when they fled to Scotland after their dissolution. The Rosslyn Chapel, which was built by the heirs of the Templars, was designed to be the new home of the Grail, a stone vault that would protect it for future generations. The Grail, in this narrative, is not just a physical object, it is a symbol of the divine wisdom, the secret knowledge that the Templars had preserved. The Ark of the Covenant, the gold-plated chest that contained the tablets of the Ten Commandments, is another legendary artifact that has been associated with Rosslyn. The Ark, which was the most sacred object in the Temple of Solomon, was lost after the Babylonian conquest of Jerusalem in 586 BC. According to some traditions, the Ark was hidden in a secret chamber beneath the temple, where it remained until it was discovered by the Templars during their excavations in the 12th century. The Templars, who had been given the Temple Mount as their headquarters, are said to have dug beneath the Al-Aqsa Mosque and found the Ark, along with other treasures and scrolls. These sacred objects were brought to Europe when the Templars fled the Holy Land, and they eventually found their way to Scotland, where they were hidden in the Rosslyn crypt. The lost scrolls of the Temple of Solomon, which are said to contain the secret wisdom of the ancient Hebrews, are a third category of legendary treasure that may be hidden at Rosslyn. The scrolls, according to the Esoteric tradition, contain the original teachings of Moses, the secrets of the Kabbalah, and the blueprints for the temple itself. The Templars, who were the guardians of the temple, are said to have discovered these scrolls and to have studied them in their secret chapter meetings. The knowledge that they contained was the source of the Templars' power and their wisdom, and it was this knowledge that they brought to Scotland. The Rosslyn Chapel, with its Kabbalistic symbolism and its replica of the temple floor plan, is the repository of this lost wisdom, a library of stone that preserves the ancient teachings for a future age. The practical reasons for the Sinclair family's refusal to open the crypt are understandable. The chapel is an ancient and fragile building, and an excavation could cause irreversible structural damage. The crypt is the burial place of the Sinclair ancestors, and to disturb their rest would be a violation of family piety. The legends of the Grail and the Ark, which have brought the chapel global fame, would be either proven false or, worse, proven true, and either outcome could have unpredictable consequences. The mystery of the crypt is, in itself, a valuable asset, a source of fascination that draws visitors from around the world. The Sinclairs, in their quiet wisdom, have chosen to preserve the mystery, to let the legend live, and to allow the crypt to remain the ultimate locked room. The future of the Rosslyn crypt is a question that will eventually have to be answered. The advance of technology, such as ground-penetrating radar and LiDAR scanning, may make it possible to explore the crypt without disturbing the surface. A virtual excavation, conducted by non-invasive means, could reveal the contents of the crypt without breaking the seal. The Sinclair family, which has been the guardian of the chapel for over 500 years, will have the final say. The crypt is their sacred trust, and they will decide when, and if, the time has come to open it. The mystery, for now, remains intact, a silent challenge that waits beneath the stone floor. The Masonic and Templar symbolism of Rosslyn Chapel is a dense and complex layer of meaning that permeates every aspect of the building. The three pillars at the east end, the master pillar, the journeyman pillar, and the apprentice pillar, are, as we have noted, a direct representation of the 3 degrees of Freemasonry. But the Masonic symbolism goes far beyond these 3 pillars. The floor of the chapel, which is laid out in a black and white checkerboard pattern, is a classic Masonic symbol that represents the duality of good and evil, light and darkness. The tracing board, which is a diagram of the Masonic lodge, is said to be reflected in the layout of the chapel. The pillars of the nave are decorated with the symbols of the Masonic craft, the square, the compass, the level, and the plumb rule. The Rosslyn Chapel, to a Freemason, is not just a church, it is a temple of initiation, a place where the secrets of the craft are displayed in stone for all to see. The connection between Rosslyn Chapel and the Knights Templar is woven into the very fabric of the building. The cross patee, the distinctive symbol of the Templars, is carved on the walls, the ceiling, and the tombs. The Lamb of God, the Agnus Dei, which was the central emblem of the Templar seal, appears in several places. The figures of knights in armor, which are carved on the pillars and the arches, are believed to represent the Templar martyrs. The Bucient, the black and white battle flag of the Templars, is said to be symbolized by the black and white checkerboard floor. The Rosslyn Chapel is a Templar monument, a silent testimony to the secret alliance between the Sinclairs and the warrior monks. The figures of the knights that are carved on the pillars of the chapel have been the subject of much study and interpretation. The most famous of these figures is the Knight of the Tomb, a carving on a pillar in the Lady Chapel that depicts a knight in full armor, lying on a tomb with his hands clasped in prayer. The knight is believed to represent Sir William Sinclair, the builder of the chapel, or perhaps a Templar knight who was buried in the crypt. Another famous carving is the Mounted Knight, a depiction of a knight on horseback, which is located on an arch near the altar. The knight is riding a horse that is trampling a dragon, a symbol of the triumph of good over evil. These knightly figures are the guardians of the chapel, the silent sentinels who watch over the sacred space. The geometric and mathematical symbolism of Rosslyn Chapel is a subject that has fascinated researchers for centuries. The dimensions of the chapel, the proportions of the pillars, and the angles of the arches are all based on a complex system of sacred geometry. The ratio of the length to the width of the chapel is said to correspond to the golden mean, the mathematical proportion that is found throughout nature, and that was used by the ancient builders of the pyramids and the temples. The number 3, which is the number of the Trinity, is repeated throughout the chapel, the 3 pillars, the 3 degrees of masonry, the 3 stages of the alchemical process. The number 7, which is the number of perfection, is also present: the 7 deadly sins, the 7 virtues, and the 7 liberal arts. The Rosslyn Chapel is a mathematical puzzle, a code that can be deciphered by those who understand the language of numbers. The 7 liberal arts, which were the foundation of the medieval curriculum, are depicted in a series of carvings on the arch of the Lady Chapel. The arts: grammar, logic, rhetoric, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy, were the subjects that were studied by the scholars of the medieval universities. Their presence in Rosslyn Chapel is a reminder that the builders were not just masons, but learned men, initiates of a tradition that valued knowledge and wisdom. The carvings of the liberal arts are a statement of the Sinclair's commitment to education and to the pursuit of truth. The Rosslyn Chapel, in this sense, is not just a church, it is a university, a place where the mind and the spirit are both nurtured. The organ loft, which was added during the Victorian Restoration, is a later addition to the chapel, but it is not without its own symbolism. The organ, which is used for the musical accompaniment of the services, is a reminder of the importance of music in the worship of the medieval church. The Rosslyn motet, which was decoded from the music boxes, is a direct link to this musical tradition. The organ loft is also decorated with carvings that are in the style of the original medieval work, including figures of angels and saints. The Victorian Restoration, which was often criticized for its heavy-handedness, was carried out with a genuine respect for the chapel's heritage, and the organ loft is a fitting addition to the building. The stained glass windows of Rosslyn Chapel, which were also part of the Victorian Restoration, are a beautiful and often overlooked feature. The windows, which were designed by the famous firm of Clayton and Bell, depict scenes from the life of Christ, the Virgin Mary, and the saints. The colors of the glass, which range from deep blues and reds to bright yellows and greens, fill the chapel with a soft, glowing light. The windows are a reminder that the medieval chapel was not the bare stone space that we see today. It was a riot of color, a kaleidoscope of light and imagery that would have taken the breath away. The stained glass is a part of the chapel's message, a message that is written in light as well as in stone. The exterior of Rosslyn Chapel, which is often overlooked by visitors who are eager to see the famous interior, is a subject of considerable interest in its own right. The exterior is a study in contrasts. The east end, which was the first part of the chapel to be built, is richly decorated with buttresses, pinnacles, and carvings. The west end, which was never completed, is a plain, unfinished wall that gives the chapel its characteristic truncated appearance. The contrast between the ornate east and the bare west is a visual reminder of the interrupted dream, the grand design that was never realized. The exterior of the chapel is also a record of the centuries of weathering and restoration, a palimpsest of stone that tells the story of the building's long and eventful life. The west door, which is the main entrance to the chapel, is a particularly rich source of symbolic imagery. The door is framed by a series of carved arches, which are decorated with figures of angels, saints, and biblical scenes. Above the door, a carving of the crucifixion shows Christ on the cross, flanked by the Virgin Mary and Saint John. The west door is the threshold of the sacred space, the portal through which the worshipper passes from the profane world into the holy. The carvings on the door are a visual catechism, a lesson in the basic tenets of the Christian faith that greeted the faithful as they entered the church. The buttresses and pinnacles that support the walls of the chapel are not just functional structural elements, they are also symbolic. The buttresses, which soar up the sides of the building, are a representation of the strength and stability of the faith. The pinnacles, which are decorated with crockets and finials, are a symbol of the aspiration of the soul toward heaven. The gargoyles, which project from the walls and serve as waterspouts, are a reminder of the forces of chaos and evil that are held at bay by the power of the church. The exterior of the chapel is a fortified wall, a spiritual fortress that protects the sacred space within. The Lady Chapel, which projects from the east end of the building, is a smaller, more intimate space that is dedicated to the Virgin Mary. The exterior of the Lady Chapel is decorated with delicate carvings of flowers, leaves, and vines, a reflection of the Virgin's purity and her association with the Garden of Paradise. The windows of the Lady Chapel are larger than those of the main body of the chapel, allowing more light to enter the sacred space. The Lady Chapel is the feminine heart of Rosslyn, a place of quiet contemplation and devotion that balances the masculine energy of the main chapel. The Apprentice Pillar, legend, which is associated with the interior of the chapel, also has an exterior echo. On the south wall of the chapel, there is a carving of a head with a wound on its forehead, which is said to represent the murdered apprentice. The head is a grim reminder of the legend, a stone memorial to the victim of jealousy. Another carving on the exterior shows a figure of a mason holding a mallet, which is believed to be the master mason who committed the murder. The exterior carvings are a narrative, a story in stone that can be read by those who know the legend. The roof of Rosslyn Chapel, which was originally covered with lead, is a significant but now lost feature of the building. The roof was removed in the 19th century during the Victorian restoration and was replaced with a new, more durable material. The original lead roof would have been a valuable asset, and it was probably sold to finance the restoration. The loss of the roof is a reminder of the practical challenges of preserving an ancient building. The roof, like the rest of the chapel, was a functional element that also had symbolic meaning, a protective covering that sheltered the sacred space from the elements. The graveyard that surrounds Rosslyn Chapel is a peaceful and evocative place, filled with ancient tombstones that bear the names and the symbols of the families who have lived and died in the village of Rosslyn for centuries. The graveyard is the final resting place of many of the masons who built the chapel, as well as of the local people who have worshipped there. The tombstones are carved with a variety of symbols: the cross, the skull and crossbones, the hourglass, and the winged cherub. The graveyard is a reminder of the passage of time, the cycle of life and death that is the ultimate context for all human endeavors. The landscape of Rosslyn Glen, which surrounds the chapel, is a deep, wooded gorge that has been a source of inspiration for artists and writers for centuries. The glen, with its rushing river, its ancient trees, and its rocky cliffs, is a place of wild and romantic beauty. It was in this glen that Sir Walter Scott set some of the scenes of his poem, The Lay of the Last Minstrel, and it has been a popular destination for tourists and pilgrims ever since. The glen is the natural context of the chapel, a reminder that the building is not just a human artifact, but a part of the living landscape, a stone flower that has grown from the rocky soil. The Sinclair family, who built and have owned Rosslyn Chapel for over 500 years, are a fascinating and enigmatic dynasty. Their story is woven into the fabric of Scottish history, from the Wars of Independence to the Jacobite rebellions, and their legacy is the chapel itself, a monument to their ambition, their piety, and their love of mystery. The Sinclairs were of Norman descent, a family of warriors and builders who had accompanied William the Conqueror to England in 1066, and who had later established themselves in Scotland. They were loyal supporters of the Scottish crown, and they were rewarded with vast estates in Midlothian, Orkney, and the Borders. They were also, as we have seen, the hereditary protectors of the Templar lands, and the guardians of the Order's secrets. The first Sinclair to hold the title of Prince of Orkney was Sir Henry Sinclair, who was granted the earldom by the Norwegian king in 1379. Henry Sinclair was a man of ambition and vision, a naval commander and an explorer who, according to the legend, led an expedition to the New World in 1398. His grandson, Sir William Sinclair, the third and final Prince of Orkney, was the builder of Rosslyn Chapel. Sir William, who lived from about 1410 to 1484, was a man of culture and learning, a patron of the arts, and a devout Christian. He was determined to build a church that would be a fitting monument to his family and his faith, and he spared no expense in its construction. The Rosslyn Chapel is his lasting legacy, a stone testament to his vision. Sir William Sinclair's reasons for building Rosslyn Chapel were complex and multifaceted. On one level, the chapel was a traditional act of piety, a collegiate foundation where priests would pray for the souls of the Sinclair ancestors. On another level, it was a display of family pride and power, a statement of the Sinclairs' wealth and status. On a deeper, esoteric level, the chapel was a repository of the secret knowledge that the Sinclairs had inherited from the Templars, a stone library that preserved the ancient wisdom for future generations. Sir William was an initiate of the Masonic craft, and his chapel was designed as a temple of initiation, a place where the mysteries could be celebrated in secret, hidden in plain sight. The decline of the Sinclair family in the centuries after the building of Rosslyn is a story of political turmoil, religious conflict, and financial misfortune. The Sinclairs remained loyal to the Catholic faith during the Scottish Reformation, and they suffered for their loyalty. They were involved in the Jacobite rebellions of the 18th century, fighting for the restoration of the Stuart dynasty. The failure of the Jacobite cause led to the decline of the family's political power and economic fortunes. The Rosslyn Chapel, which had been the family's greatest pride, fell into disrepair. The roof leaked, the stonework crumbled, and the beautiful carvings were damaged by the weather. The 19th century restoration of Rosslyn Chapel, which was undertaken by the 4th Earl of Rosslyn, was an act of family piety and national pride. The Earl, who was a prominent politician and a lover of the arts, was determined to save his family's chapel from ruin. He commissioned the architect David Bryce to restore the building to its original glory. The restoration was a massive and expensive undertaking, but it was successful in preserving the chapel for future generations. The restoration, however, also introduced a layer of Victorian interpretation that has complicated the task of understanding the original medieval work. The restored chapel is a palimpsest, a building that bears the marks of both the 15th and the 19th centuries. The present-day Sinclair family, who still own Rosslyn Chapel, are the custodians of a unique and precious heritage. The Rosslyn Chapel Trust, which was established in 1995, is responsible for the conservation and management of the building. The Trust has undertaken a major program of restoration and interpretation, cleaning the stonework, repairing the roof, and installing a new visitor center. The Trust has also embraced the legends and the mysteries of the chapel, recognizing that they are a vital part of its appeal. The Trust's mission is to preserve the chapel for future generations, to educate the public about its history and its significance, and to allow the mystery to live. The role of the Sinclair family in the Masonic and Templar traditions is a legacy that continues to this day. The Sinclairs are still regarded as the hereditary Grand Masters of the Scottish Masonic lodges, and they are revered by Freemasons around the world. The Rosslyn Chapel, which was built by their ancestor, is a pilgrimage site for Masons, who come to marvel at the symbolic carvings and to connect with the ancient roots of their craft. The Sinclairs, in their quiet and dignified way, are the guardians of a secret that has been passed down through the centuries, a secret that is written in the stones of their family's chapel. The future of the Sinclair family and their chapel is a story that is still being written. The global fame that has been brought to Rosslyn by the Da Vinci Code and other popular works has been a mixed blessing. The increased number of visitors has provided the funds for the ongoing restoration, but it has also placed a strain on the ancient building and its quiet village. The Sinclair family and the Rosslyn Chapel Trust are grappling with the challenges of balancing conservation, tourism, and the spiritual and esoteric significance of the site. The Rosslyn Chapel, which has stood for over 550 years, is facing the future with a quiet confidence, secure in the knowledge that its secrets are still intact, waiting to be discovered. The Rosslyn Chapel in popular culture has become a global icon of mystery, largely due to its central role in Dan Brown's 2003 novel The Da Vinci Code and its 2006 film adaptation. Brown's thriller, which follows the symbologist Robert Langdon on a quest for the Holy Grail, ends at Rosslyn Chapel, where the secret of the bloodline of Christ is finally revealed. The novel, which sold over 80 million copies worldwide, transformed Rosslyn from a quiet country church into a major tourist destination, attracting hundreds of thousands of visitors each year. The chapel's mysterious carvings, its sealed crypt, and its Templar connections made it the perfect setting for a modern Grail quest, and the Sinclair family, who had guarded the secrets for centuries, were suddenly thrust into the center of a global phenomenon. The impact of the Da Vinci Code on Rosslyn Chapel was immediate and dramatic. The number of visitors, which had been a modest few thousand per year, skyrocketed to over 200,000. The village of Rosslyn, which had been a sleepy hamlet, was suddenly thronged with tourists, all eager to see the famous chapel. The Rosslyn Chapel Trust, which was responsible for the care of the building, had to quickly adapt to the new reality. A new visitor center was built, guided tours were organized, and a range of books and souvenirs were produced. The chapel, which had been in danger of falling into ruin a century earlier, was now financially secure, thanks to the power of a popular novel. The relationship between the historical truth of Rosslyn and the fictional narrative of the Da Vinci Code is a complex and often contentious one. Brown's novel, which is a work of fiction, takes considerable liberties with the history of the chapel and the Templars. The bloodline theory, which is central to the plot, is based on the discredited priory of Shaun hoax and has been thoroughly debunked by historians. The Rosslyn Chapel Trust, while acknowledging the benefits of the increased tourism, is careful to distinguish between the fictional account and the historical reality. The guides who lead the tours are trained to answer the questions of the Grail seekers with a mixture of tact and historical accuracy, gently steering them away from the wilder speculations while acknowledging the genuine mysteries of the chapel. The cinematic adaptation of the Da Vinci Code, directed by Ron Howard and starring Tom Hanks, was filmed in part at Rosslyn Chapel, a decision that required delicate negotiations with the Trust and the local authorities. The film crew, which was granted access to the chapel for a limited period, treated the ancient building with great care, but the presence of a Hollywood production in the quiet village of Rosslyn was a dramatic event. The film, which was released in 2006, brought the images of Rosslyn to a global audience of hundreds of millions, further cementing its status as a cultural icon. The chapel, in the years since the film's release, has continued to attract a steady stream of visitors, many of whom have been inspired by the novel and the film. The broader cultural significance of Rosslyn Chapel extends far beyond its role in the Da Vinci Code. The chapel has been a source of inspiration for artists, writers, and musicians for centuries. The Romantics of the 19th century, including Sir Walter Scott, William Wordsworth, and J.M.W. Turner, were drawn to the chapel's wild and mysterious beauty. The Scottish Celtic revival of the early 20th century, led by figures such as the painter John Duncan, found in Rosslyn a wellspring of national and spiritual identity. The modern Esoteric and New Age movements have adopted the chapel as a sacred site, a place of power where the veil between the worlds is thin. The Rosslyn Chapel, in all its many facets, is a mirror that reflects the dreams and the anxieties of the culture. The conspiracy theories that have grown up around Rosslyn Chapel are a fascinating and sometimes disturbing aspect of its cultural legacy. The bloodline theory, which is the most famous, claims that the chapel is the final resting place of the descendants of Jesus Christ and Mary Magdalene. Other theories claim that the chapel contains the Ark of the Covenant, the Holy Grail, the lost scrolls of the temple, or the mummified head of Christ. Some theories even claim that the chapel is a portal to another dimension, or that it was built by aliens. The persistence of these theories is a testament to the power of the chapel's mystique, a mystique that has been carefully cultivated by the Sinclair family and by the popular media. The response of the Rosslyn Chapel Trust to the conspiracy theories is a model of tact and diplomacy. The Trust neither confirms nor denies the legends, recognizing that they are a vital part of the chapel's appeal. The guides who lead the tours are encouraged to present the historical facts, but also to acknowledge the enduring mysteries. The Trust policy is to let the visitors make up their own minds, to experience the chapel for themselves, and to draw their own conclusions. This policy, which is both pragmatic and wise, has allowed Rosslyn to remain a place of wonder and enchantment, a space where the imagination can roam free, undisturbed by the dogmas of either the skeptic or the believer. The future of Rosslyn Chapel in popular culture is likely to be as rich and as varied as its past. The chapel, which has already inspired a blockbuster novel and a Hollywood film, is a permanent fixture in the global imagination. It is a place that seems to have been designed for the digital age, a stone puzzle that invites endless interpretation and debate. The Rosslyn Chapel, with its sealed crypt and its cryptic carvings, is a mystery that will continue to captivate and to inspire for generations to come. The messages in the stone are waiting to be read, and the world is watching. Narration for Chapter 10, Create File, Chapter 10.wave. The academic and archaeological study of Rosslyn Chapel has, in recent decades, sought to move beyond the legends and to understand the building in its historical and artistic context. The work of historians such as the late Dr. John Higgett, who published the definitive study of the chapel's carvings, and Dr. Richard Fawcett, a leading authority on Scottish medieval architecture, has done much to illuminate the original meaning and purpose of the building. These scholars have shown that Rosslyn, while unique in many respects, is not an isolated phenomenon, but is deeply rooted in the traditions of Scottish and European Gothic architecture. The chapel is a masterpiece of its age, a product of a sophisticated and cosmopolitan culture that was open to influences from France, the Low Countries, and the Mediterranean. The analysis of the carvings by art historians has revealed a complex and carefully planned iconographic program. The apparent chaos of the carvings, which can be so bewildering to the visitor, is, in fact, a highly organized system of meaning. The biblical scenes, the pagan deities, the moral allegories, and the esoteric symbols are all part of a unified vision, a visual summa of the medieval worldview. The chapel, in the words of Dr. Higgett, is a Bible in stone, a comprehensive visual encyclopedia of the Christian faith that was designed to instruct, to inspire, and to move the heart. The carvings are not just decoration, they are a sermon, a prayer, and a poem, all carved in the enduring medium of stone. The archaeological investigation of the Rosslyn crypt, which has been so long delayed, is a goal that is now within reach, thanks to the advances in non-invasive technology. Ground-penetrating radar, which uses radio waves to image the subsurface, and LiDAR scanning, which uses lasers to create a three-dimensional map, have the potential to reveal the contents of the crypt without disturbing the seal. A team of archaeologists, led by Dr. Oliver O'Grady of the University of Edinburgh, has conducted preliminary surveys of the chapel using these techniques, but a full investigation of the crypt has not yet been authorized by the Sinclair family. The technology exists, and the will is there. The only missing factor is the permission. The analysis of the human remains that are buried in the Rosslyn graveyard and possibly in the crypt could, if permitted, shed light on the lives of the people who built and used the chapel. DNA analysis, which has been used to trace the ancestry and migration patterns of ancient populations, could reveal the origins of the Sinclair family and the Masons. The bones of the knights, if they are buried in their armor, could provide information about their diet, their health, and the battles they fought. The science of bioarchaeology has the potential to unlock a wealth of information about the medieval world, and Rosslyn is a prime candidate for such a study. The ethical questions surrounding the disturbance of human remains are, however, profound and complex. The conservation of Rosslyn Chapel is an ongoing challenge that requires a delicate balance between preservation and access. The sandstone, which is so beautiful and so easy to carve, is also very susceptible to weathering. The rain and the wind, which have been beating on the chapel for over 500 years, have taken their toll. The exterior carvings, which were once sharp and crisp, have been worn smooth. The interior, which is protected from the elements, is in better condition, but it is still vulnerable to the effects of humidity, temperature changes, and the breath of the thousands of visitors. The Rosslyn Chapel Trust, in collaboration with experts from Historic Environment Scotland, is constantly monitoring the condition of the building and implementing measures to ensure its long-term survival. The debate over the restoration of Rosslyn Chapel, which has been ongoing since the 19th century, reflects the conflicting values of the modern conservation movement. The Victorian restoration, which was intended to return the chapel to its original glory, is now seen by many as a heavy-handed intervention that compromised the authenticity of the building. The modern approach, which is to preserve the building as it is, with all the marks of age and wear, is a reaction against the Victorian philosophy. The Rosslyn Chapel Trust has adopted a cautious and conservative approach, seeking to stabilize the building and to prevent further decay, rather than to restore it to a hypothetical original state. The debate over the best way to care for the chapel is a reflection of the larger debate over the meaning of history and the nature of heritage. The Rosslyn Chapel, as a living place of worship, is still used for regular religious services. The Scottish Episcopal Church, which is part of the worldwide Anglican Communion, holds a weekly Eucharist in the chapel, and the building is also used for weddings, baptisms, and funerals. The spiritual life of the chapel, which is the reason for its existence, is a vital part of its identity. The tourists and the Grail seekers who visit the chapel are often unaware of its ongoing religious function, but the chapel is not a museum. It is a church, a place where the divine is still worshipped and where the prayers of the faithful are still offered. The Rosslyn Chapel, in its quiet and unassuming way, is a bridge between the ancient and the modern, the sacred and the secular, the known and the unknown. The music boxes of Rosslyn Chapel, which we have briefly touched upon, deserve a more detailed examination. These are a series of 213 carved cubes that protrude from the arches of the Lady Chapel, each one decorated with a unique geometric pattern of circles, triangles, and lines. For centuries, their meaning was a complete mystery. Then, in 2005, a retired music teacher from Edinburgh named Thomas Mitchell and his son Stuart, a software engineer, took on the challenge of decoding them. The Mitchells were not historians or archaeologists. They were simply fascinated by the puzzle. They noticed that the patterns on the cubes resembled the patterns of sound waves, and they began to experiment with different ways of translating the visual patterns into musical notes. After 2 years of painstaking work, they announced that they had cracked the code. The cubes, they said, were a musical score, a piece of music that had been frozen in stone for over 500 years. The decoding of the Rosslyn motet was a brilliant piece of amateur scholarship, but it was not without its critics. Some musicologists have questioned the Mitchells' methodology, arguing that the translation of the visual patterns into notes is arbitrary and that the resulting melody is not historically plausible. Others have pointed out that the cubes were restored in the 19th century, and that the patterns that the Mitchells decoded may be Victorian, not medieval. Despite these objections, the Rosslyn motet has captured the public imagination. The melody, which is a simple, haunting kyrie, is a direct link to the medieval mind, a sound that has been silent for centuries. The music boxes are a testament to the ingenuity of the Masons and to the power of the human mind to solve even the most complex puzzles. The symbolic meaning of the Rosslyn motet, if the Mitchells are correct, is a matter of speculation. The kyrie, which is a prayer for mercy, is a fitting theme for a chapel that is dedicated to the memory of the dead. The melody, which is in a medieval mode, is both beautiful and melancholy, a reflection on the transience of life and the hope of eternal salvation. The music boxes, in their silent vigil, were a prayer that was waiting to be voiced, a song that was waiting to be sung. The Rosslyn motet is the voice of the stones, a voice that has finally been heard after 5 centuries of silence. The relationship between music and architecture is a profound one, and Rosslyn is a prime example of this connection. The medieval cathedrals and churches were designed to be acoustic spaces, places where the sound of the choir and the organ would resonate and fill the sacred space. The proportions of the chapel, the height of the vault, and the placement of the pillars all contribute to the acoustic quality of the building. The music boxes, which are carved into the stone, are a physical manifestation of this connection, a reminder that the chapel was not just a visual experience, but a multi-sensory one. The Rosslyn motet, when it is sung in the chapel, is a restoration of the original experience, a completion of the circle. The Rosslyn Chapel was designed to be a place of harmony, a place where the visual, the auditory, and the spiritual are all in alignment. The carvings, the music, the light, and the sacred geometry all work together to create an environment that is conducive to meditation and prayer. The chapel is a holistic work of art, a Gesamtkunstwerk, a total work of art that engages all the senses. The builders of Rosslyn were not just masons, they were artists, philosophers, and mystics who understood the power of the built environment to shape the human soul. The Rosslyn Chapel is their masterpiece, a gift to the future that continues to inspire and to uplift. The broader context of medieval music, which was an integral part of the liturgy and the life of the Church, is essential for understanding the Rosslyn motet. The Kyrie, which is one of the oldest parts of the Mass, is a prayer that was sung at the beginning of the service. The melody of the Rosslyn motet, which is in the Dorian mode, is characteristic of the medieval period, and it has a timeless, haunting quality that transports the listener back to the age of faith. The music boxes, in their silent way, are a witness to this rich musical tradition, a tradition that was almost entirely lost during the Reformation. The future of the Rosslyn motet is in the hands of the musicians and the scholars who continue to study the chapel. The melody, which has been recorded and performed around the world, is now a permanent part of the chapel's legacy. The music boxes, which have yielded their secret, are no longer a puzzle, but a testament to the creativity and the intelligence of the medieval masons. The Rosslyn motet is a gift from the past, a song that has finally been heard, and it is a reminder that the stones of Rosslyn still have stories to tell. The specific carvings of the Dance of Death in Rosslyn Chapel are among the most evocative and theologically dense images in the entire building. Located in the Lady Chapel, the Dance of Death is a medieval artistic genre that personifies death as a skeletal figure who leads people from all walks of life in a grim procession to the grave. At Rosslyn, the sequence begins with a king and a queen, symbols of worldly power and wealth. Next comes a bishop, representing the authority of the church. Then a knight, the embodiment of military prowess. The procession continues with a merchant, a maiden, a child, and finally a laborer, each figure being beckoned by a grinning skeleton. The message is stark and inescapable: memento mori, remember that you will die. Death is the great leveler, and no amount of wealth, power, or piety can save you from its embrace. The Dance of Death was a particularly poignant theme in the late medieval period, a time when Europe was ravaged by the Black Death, the 100 Years' War, and the constant threat of famine. The plague, which killed an estimated 1/3 of Europe's population in the 14th century, was a traumatic event that left a deep scar on the collective psyche. The Dance of Death, with its relentless emphasis on mortality, was a way for the survivors to process their grief and to confront their own fears. It was also a moral lesson, a warning to the living to repent of their sins and to prepare for the final judgment. The Rosslyn Dance of Death is a profound and moving meditation on the human condition, a stone sermon on the vanity of earthly glory. The Rosslyn Dance of Death is notable for its inclusion of a child in the procession. The child, who is shown dancing with a skeleton, is a particularly heartbreaking image, a reminder that death is no respecter of age. The inclusion of the child also reflects a broader medieval theme, the innocence of childhood, and the tragedy of a life cut short. The Dance of Death at Rosslyn is not just a warning to the rich and the powerful, it is a universal statement about the human condition, a reminder that we are all, from the moment of our birth, on a journey toward the grave. The child, in its innocence, is a symbol of the soul, which must face its maker. The figure of death in the Rosslyn carvings is not portrayed as a terrifying monster, but as a matter-of-fact, almost friendly guide. The skeletons are grinning, but not in a malicious way. They are simply doing their job, leading the reluctant humans toward the inevitable. This portrayal of death as a companion, rather than a fiend, is a characteristic of the late medieval period, a softening of the earlier, more horrific depictions. The Dance of Death, in this more gentle form, is an invitation to accept mortality, to make peace with the finite nature of human existence, and to place one's trust in the promise of the resurrection. The symbolic location of the Dance of Death in the Lady Chapel, the space dedicated to the Virgin Mary, is highly significant. Mary, who is the Mother of God and the Queen of Heaven, is the figure who intercedes for the souls of the faithful at the hour of their death. The presence of the Dance of Death in her chapel is a reminder that even the most powerful woman in the universe cannot save a person from physical death, but she can intercede for their soul at the final judgment. The Dance of Death, in this context, is a prayer for a good death, a death that is accepted with faith and hope. The Victorian restoration of Rosslyn Chapel included a significant recarving of the Dance of Death panels, which had been badly eroded over the centuries. The 19th century masons, working under the direction of the architect David Bryce, recreated the damaged panels based on the surviving fragments and on their own knowledge of medieval art. This restoration, which was necessary to preserve the images, has raised the same questions of authenticity that surround the Maize and aloe carvings. The Dance of Death that we see today is a Victorian interpretation of a medieval original, a palimpsest that bears the marks of two different eras. The philosophical implications of the Dance of Death are profound. The image of the skeleton leading the living is a stark reminder of the dual nature of the human being. We are both a body, which will decay and return to dust, and a soul, which is immortal. The Dance of Death, in its silent eloquence, raises the ultimate questions: what is the meaning of life? What happens after death? How should we live in the face of our own mortality? The Rosslyn Chapel, through its carvings, offers a Christian answer to these questions. Live a life of faith, hope, and charity, and trust in the mercy of God. The dance of death is a lesson, a warning, and a promise. The connection between Rosslyn Chapel and the legendary figure of Hiram Abiff, the architect of Solomon's Temple, is a cornerstone of Masonic tradition. In the ritual of Freemasonry, Hiram Abiff is the central figure of the Master Mason degree. He is portrayed as the wise and skilled builder who was murdered by three ruffians, Jabila, Jubilo, and Jubilam, who sought to extract the secret word of a Master Mason from him. Hiram refused to reveal the word, and he was killed by blows to the head, a martyr to his fidelity and his secrecy. The legend of Hiram Abiff is a moral allegory about the importance of keeping one's obligations, the inevitability of death, and the hope of resurrection. It is the foundational myth of the Masonic craft. The apprentice pillar at Rosslyn is, as we have seen, a direct parallel to the Hiramic legend. The story of the murdered apprentice, who is killed by his jealous master for having created a pillar of surpassing beauty, is a retelling of the same essential story. The apprentice, like Hiram, is a victim of envy and a martyr to his skill. The master, like the three ruffians, is a figure of blind rage and destructive pride. The pillar itself, which is a masterpiece of the stonemason's art, is the legacy of the martyr, a stone testament to his genius that will outlast his murderer. The apprentice pillar is a Masonic monument, a silent lesson in stone that instructs the initiate in the central tenets of the craft. The three ruffians of the Hiramic legend are symbolized in the Rosslyn Chapel by three carved heads that are located in the Lady Chapel. The heads, which are known as the three murderers, are said to represent Jabila, Jubilo, and Jubilam, the assassins of Hiram Abiff. The heads are a grim reminder of the consequences of treachery, and the fate that awaits those who violate the sacred obligations of the Masonic craft. The presence of these heads in the Lady Chapel, the holiest part of the building, is a sign of the central importance of the Hiramic legend to the builders of Rosslyn. The search for the secret word of a Master Mason, which is the core of the Hiramic legend, is a metaphor for the search for spiritual truth. The word, which was lost at the death of Hiram, is said to be recovered at the end of the initiation ritual, a symbol of the resurrection and the hope of eternal life. The Rosslyn Chapel, with its sealed crypt and its encoded messages, is a physical representation of this search. The secret of the chapel, whatever it may be, the Grail, the Ark, the Scrolls, is the lost word of the Masonic tradition, a truth that is hidden but not lost, waiting to be rediscovered by a new generation of seekers. The role of King Solomon in the Masonic tradition is also reflected in the Rosslyn Chapel. Solomon, who was the builder of the first temple in Jerusalem, is the patron saint of the Masonic craft. His wisdom and his justice are celebrated in the Masonic rituals, and his temple is the model for the Masonic lodge. The Rosslyn Chapel, which is a replica of the Temple of Solomon in its floor plan, is a tribute to the legendary king. The chapel, in this sense, is a new temple, a new dwelling place for the divine presence, built by the heirs of the Masonic craft. The Queen of Sheba, who visited Solomon and was overwhelmed by his wisdom, is another biblical figure who appears in the Masonic tradition and in the carvings of Rosslyn. The legend of the Queen of Sheba, which is told in the Book of Kings and in the Ethiopian epic Kebra Nagast, is a story of the union of wisdom and beauty, of the meeting of the masculine and the feminine principles. The Rosslyn Chapel, with its dedication to the Virgin Mary and its celebration of the sacred feminine, is a fitting place for the memory of the Queen of Sheba. The chapel is a place of harmony, a place where the opposites are reconciled. The Masonic tradition that claims descent from the Templars, which is embodied in the Scottish Rite and the York Rite, is a living tradition that continues to this day. The Rosslyn Chapel, which is a pilgrimage site for Freemasons from around the world, is a tangible link to the ancient origins of the craft. The Masons who visit the chapel are not just tourists, they are pilgrims, seeking to connect with the spiritual ancestors who built the great cathedrals and who preserve the secret wisdom of the ages. The Rosslyn Chapel, in its quiet and enduring way, is a temple of the Masonic faith, a place where the mysteries are still celebrated and the secrets are still kept. The global impact of Rosslyn Chapel on the heritage tourism industry has been profound and transformative. Before the publication of the Da Vinci Code in 2003, Rosslyn was a relatively obscure historical site, visited mainly by scholars, masons, and a small number of tourists with a specialized interest in the Templars or medieval architecture. The novel changed everything, almost overnight. The annual visitor numbers soared from fewer than 10,000 to over 200,000 within a few years, a phenomenon that has been dubbed the Da Vinci Code effect. The chapel, which had been struggling to finance its ongoing conservation, was suddenly flush with income from ticket sales, guidebooks, and a new visitor center. The economic impact on the village of Rosslyn and the surrounding area of Midlothian has been substantial, creating jobs and supporting local businesses. The management of the huge influx of visitors has been a major challenge for the Rosslyn Chapel Trust. The chapel is a small, fragile building, and it was never designed to accommodate the number of people who now wish to see it. The Trust has implemented a system of time tickets, guided tours, and restrictions on photography to manage the flow of people and to protect the fabric of the building. The Visitor Center, which was built in 2011, provides a space for interpretation, education, and retail, helping to disperse the crowds and to enhance the visitor experience. The Trust has walked a delicate tightrope, balancing the need for public access with the imperative of conservation. The educational mission of the Rosslyn Chapel Trust is a vital part of its work. The Trust offers a range of educational programs for schools, universities, and adult learners, designed to teach the history, the art, and the symbolism of the chapel. The guides who lead the tours are highly trained and knowledgeable, and they are skilled at answering the diverse and often challenging questions of the visitors. The Trust's website and its publications provide a wealth of information for those who cannot visit in person. The Rosslyn Chapel, in the 21st century, is not just a tourist attraction, it is a center of learning, a place where the mysteries of the past are explored and explained. The relationship between Rosslyn Chapel and the local community of Rosslyn is a strong and mutually beneficial one. The residents of the village, who were initially overwhelmed by the sudden influx of tourists, have adapted to the new reality with a characteristic Scottish pragmatism. The local pubs, cafes, and shops have benefited from the increased trade, and the chapel has become a source of civic pride. The Rosslyn Chapel Trust works closely with the community to manage the impact of tourism and to ensure that the village remains a pleasant place to live. The chapel, which was built by the Sinclair family for the benefit of the local community, is still fulfilling that function over 5 centuries later. The ethical considerations of the commercialization of a sacred site are a subject of ongoing debate at Rosslyn. The chapel is, first and foremost, a place of worship, and its primary function is to serve the spiritual needs of its congregation. The presence of hundreds of thousands of tourists, many of whom are drawn by the legends and the conspiracy theories, can be a distraction from that mission. The Rosslyn Chapel Trust is sensitive to this tension, and it strives to maintain the sacred character of the building while welcoming the curious and the seeking. The chapel, in its ability to accommodate both the pilgrim and the tourist, is a model of how a historic site can serve multiple, and sometimes conflicting, purposes. The replica of the Rosslyn Chapel that was built in the United States, at the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C., is a testament to the global reach of the chapel's mystique. The replica, which is a carved stone doorway, was created by the master mason and sculptor, Vincent Palumbo, and it is a faithful reproduction of the original. The doorway, which is a tribute to the artistry of the medieval masons, is a sign of the deep connection between the American Masonic community and the Scottish Templar tradition. The Rosslyn Chapel, which was built in a quiet Scottish glen, has become a global symbol, a stone icon that is recognized and revered around the world. The future of heritage tourism at Rosslyn Chapel is likely to be shaped by the ongoing debate over authenticity, sustainability, and the impact of technology. The Da Vinci Code effect has passed its peak, but the chapel continues to attract a steady stream of visitors, drawn by its enduring mystique. The Rosslyn Chapel Trust is planning for a future that is less dependent on a single cultural phenomenon, a future that is built on the chapel's intrinsic qualities, its beauty, its history, and its mystery. The Rosslyn Chapel, which has stood for over 550 years, is entering its next chapter with confidence and grace. The legend of Rosslyn Chapel, as we have explored it in this first part of our investigation, is a multi-layered and endlessly fascinating tapestry, woven from threads of history, myth, art, and esoteric symbolism. We have examined the historical context of its construction by the Sinclair family, the heirs of the Templar legacy in Scotland, and we have analyzed the intricate carvings that cover its interior, from the famous apprentice pillar to the controversial maize and aloe plants. We have delved into the sealed crypt, the ultimate locked room of the Templar mystery, and we have explored the Masonic and musical codes that are hidden within the stone. The Rosslyn Chapel is a book of secrets, a stone library that has been waiting for centuries to be fully read. The meaning of Rosslyn Chapel, after all the analysis and the debate, remains elusive. It is a building that refuses to be pinned down, a mystery that resists a final, definitive solution. The chapel is, at once, a Christian church, a Templar monument, a Masonic temple, and a pagan shrine. It is a work of art, a piece of music, and a mathematical puzzle. It is a place of worship, a tourist attraction, and a pilgrimage site. The Rosslyn Chapel is all of these things, and none of them exclusively. Its genius lies in its ability to contain multitudes, to speak to different people in different ways, and to remain forever open to interpretation. The Rosslyn Chapel is a mirror that reflects the seeker. The devout Christian sees a beautiful church, a testament to the faith of the medieval Masons. The Templar enthusiast sees a secret commandery, a repository for the order's lost treasure. The Freemason sees a temple of initiation, a stone representation of the craft's ancient mysteries. The conspiracy theorist sees a cipher, a coded message that reveals the hidden history of the world. The artist sees a masterpiece, a symphony in stone. The chapel, in its infinite complexity, is all of these things, and more. It is a place where the imagination is set free, where the boundaries between the sacred and the profane, the historical and the mythical, are blurred and dissolved. The first part of our journey into the Rosslyn mystery has taken us through the history, the architecture, and the symbolism of the chapel. We have laid the groundwork for a deeper exploration. In the second part of this series, we will descend into the even more hidden depths of the Rosslyn legend. We will examine the detailed evidence for the Templar-Sinclair connection, the controversial theories about the pre-Columbian voyage to the New World, and the secret traditions of the Masonic craft that are encoded in the stones. We will explore the stories of the individuals who have been captivated by the chapel, from the medieval Masons to the modern code breakers, and we will seek to understand the enduring power of Rosslyn to inspire, to intrigue, and to transform. Join us in the second part of our investigation, as we continue to decode the messages in the stone, to unravel the secrets of the vault, and to seek the truth that lies at the heart of the most mysterious chapel in the world. The Rosslyn Chapel is waiting, its secrets intact, its stones silent, its mysteries ready to be revealed to those who have the eyes to see and the ears to hear. The quest for the Grail, the Ark, and the lost wisdom of the temple continues, and Rosslyn is the key to it all. We will see you in the next part of this incredible journey. I hope you have enjoyed this exploration so far, and I look forward to continuing the quest with you. The enigmatic plan of Rosslyn Chapel, which has often been described as an exact replica of the floor plan of Herod's temple in Jerusalem, is one of the most potent and enduring mysteries of the building. This theory, which was first proposed in the 19th century and has been elaborated by countless researchers since, holds that Sir William Sinclair, the builder of Rosslyn, deliberately designed his chapel to mirror the sacred proportions and layout of the temple that once stood on the Temple Mount. The Temple of Herod, which was the second temple, rebuilt and expanded by King Herod the Great, was the central sanctuary of the Jewish faith and the place where Jesus himself had walked and taught. For the Knights Templar, who had their headquarters on the Temple Mount, and who took their name from Solomon's Temple, the design of the sacred building held a profound symbolic significance. If Rosslyn is indeed a copy of that lost temple, it is a statement of immense spiritual and political importance, a declaration that the Sinclair family, the heirs of the Templars, were the true guardians of the Jerusalem tradition. The evidence for the Herod's Temple theory rests primarily on the measurements of the chapel. When the interior dimensions of Rosslyn are compared with the biblical descriptions of the temple, particularly those found in the Book of Kings and the Book of Chronicles, a remarkable correspondence emerges. The length and width of the chapel, the position of the pillars, and the layout of the eastern end, where the altar is located, all align with the dimensions of the temple's holy place and the Holy of Holies. The three principal pillars at the east end of Rosslyn, the master pillar, the journeyman pillar, and the apprentice pillar, are said to correspond to the pillars of Jachin and Boaz that stood at the entrance to Solomon's temple, with the apprentice pillar representing the central axis of the sacred space. The chapel, in its very geometry, is a prayer for the restoration of the temple, a stone prophecy that the sacred center of the world would one day be rebuilt. The idea of building a replica of the Temple of Jerusalem in a foreign land is not unique to Rosslyn. Throughout the Middle Ages, churches and cathedrals across Europe were designed to evoke the heavenly Jerusalem, and, in some cases, to replicate the specific features of the Holy Sepulchre and the Temple. The round churches of the Templars, such as the Temple Church in London, were explicitly modeled on the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which was itself built on the site of Christ's crucifixion and resurrection. The Rosslyn Chapel, if it is a replica of Herod's Temple, takes this tradition of sacred imitation to its ultimate extreme. It is not just a church, it is a temple, a new dwelling place for the divine presence, built in a land that was far from the Holy Land but that was, in the eyes of its builders, the new Promised Land. The connection between the floor plan of Rosslyn and the description of the temple in the Book of Ezekiel is another layer of the mystery. The prophet Ezekiel, who was exiled in Babylon in the 6th century BC, had a vision of a new temple, a vast, idealized structure that was measured out by an angel. The dimensions of Ezekiel's temple, which are given in meticulous detail, have been a source of fascination for mystics, Kabbalists, and Freemasons for centuries. Some researchers have argued that the Rosslyn Chapel is not a copy of the historical Herod's Temple, but a representation of Ezekiel's visionary temple, a building that was never constructed in stone but that exists in the realm of the spirit. The Rosslyn Chapel, in this reading, is a prophecy, a vision of the future that was carved into the present. The implications of the Herod's Temple theory are staggering. If Rosslyn is a replica of the temple, then it follows that the sacred objects that were housed in the temple, the Ark of the Covenant, the table of showbread, the menorah, are symbolically present in the chapel. The sealed crypt, which lies beneath the Holy of Holies, would be the resting place of these symbolic treasures, or perhaps even the resting place of the physical treasures themselves, brought to Scotland by the Templars. The Rosslyn Chapel, in this interpretation, is not just a building, it is a reliquary, a stone ark that contains the most sacred objects in the history of the world. The Scottish historian and Freemason, Robert L. D. Cooper, in his rigorous analysis of the Rosslyn myths, has cast doubt on the Herod's Temple theory, arguing that the evidence is based on selective measurements and wishful thinking. Cooper points out that the biblical descriptions of the temple are often vague and contradictory, and that the dimensions of Rosslyn do not match any single interpretation with exact precision. The theory, he suggests, is a product of the 19th century Masonic imagination, a romantic projection that has been retroactively applied to the chapel. Cooper's skepticism is a valuable corrective, reminding us that the legends of Rosslyn must be tested against the hard evidence of the stones themselves. Despite the scholarly skepticism, the Herod's Temple theory continues to hold a powerful grip on the popular imagination. The idea that a small chapel in a Scottish glen is a copy of the most sacred building in the biblical world is simply too compelling to be dismissed. The Rosslyn Chapel, whether it is an exact replica or a symbolic evocation, is a testament to the enduring human desire to connect with the sacred places of the past, to rebuild the temple, and to recover the lost wisdom of the ancients. The floor plan of Rosslyn is a map of the soul, a guide to the inner sanctuary where the divine presence dwells. The enigmatic figure of Sir William Sinclair, the builder of Rosslyn Chapel, is central to any understanding of the building's meaning and purpose. Sir William, the third and final Prince of Orkney, was a man of immense wealth, power, and ambition, But he was also a man of profound faith and intellectual curiosity. His family had been the hereditary protectors of the Templar lands in Scotland, and he himself was the hereditary Grand Master of the Scottish Masonic lodges. He was a collector of books, a patron of the arts, and a student of the esoteric sciences. He was, in short, a Renaissance man before the Renaissance had fully arrived in Scotland. The Rosslyn Chapel, which he built at the end of his life, was the culmination of his life's work, a stone testament to his faith, his knowledge, and his vision. The library of Sir William Sinclair, which was described by the chronicler Father Hay as one of the finest in Scotland, is a crucial clue to the intellectual background of the chapel. The library, which was dispersed and lost after the family's decline, is said to have contained works on alchemy, astrology, geometry, and the Kabbalah, as well as the standard texts of Christian theology and devotion. Sir William was not just a patron of the arts, he was a scholar, a man who had delved deeply into the hidden knowledge of the ancient world. The Rosslyn Chapel, which is saturated with esoteric symbolism, is the product of a mind that was steeped in the Hermetic and Neoplatonic traditions. Sir William's decision to build Rosslyn as a collegiate church, a foundation of priests who would pray for the souls of his family, was a traditional act of medieval piety. But the form that the church took was anything but traditional. The rite of carving, the fusion of Christian and pagan imagery, the encoded Masonic symbolism, and the precise mathematical proportions all point to a deeper, more esoteric purpose. The chapel was not just a place of prayer, it was a place of initiation, a temple of wisdom, and a repository of secret knowledge. Sir William, who was the head of the Masonic lodges of Scotland, built his chapel as a monument to the craft, a stone library that would preserve the ancient mysteries for future generations. The political context of Sir William's life and his building project is also significant. The 15th century was a time of consolidation for the Scottish monarchy, and the powerful noble families were eager to display their loyalty and their status. The Sinclairs, who had been staunch supporters of the Bruce during the Wars of Independence, were now loyal servants of the Stuart kings. The building of Rosslyn Chapel was, in part, a political statement, a display of the family's wealth, their connections, and their cultural sophistication. But the chapel was also a statement of independence, a sign that the Sinclairs were a power in their own right, with their own traditions and their own secrets. The chapel, in its quiet defiance, was a monument to a family that had its roots in the Templar past. The death of Sir William Sinclair in 1484, before his grand design could be completed, is one of the great tragedies of Scottish architectural history. The chapel, which was meant to be the choir of a vast cruciform church, was left as a fragment, a tantalizing glimpse of a dream that was never realized. Sir William's son, Sir Oliver Sinclair, lacked his father's vision and his resources, and the grand design was abandoned. The unfinished west front of the chapel, with its plain, undecorated wall, is a permanent reminder of the interrupted dream, the stone testament to a vision that was cut short by the hand of death. The burial of Sir William Sinclair in the Rosslyn crypt, according to family tradition, was a ritual that echoed the burial customs of the Templars. He was laid to rest in his full armor, with his sword by his side and his helmet on his head, a knight who was ready to rise and fight at the Last Judgment. The crypt, which was sealed after his burial, became the sacred center of the chapel, the Holy of Holies where the founder of the church was interred. The refusal of the Sinclair family to open the crypt, despite centuries of pressure, is a mark of their deep respect for their ancestor and their determination to protect his final resting place. The legacy of Sir William Sinclair, the builder of Rosslyn, is the chapel itself, a building that has captivated the imagination of the world. His vision, which was encoded in the stones, has outlasted his family's political power, their wealth, and their very memory. The Rosslyn Chapel is a monument to a man who was both a warrior and a mystic, a patron of the arts and a student of the esoteric, a faithful Christian and a guardian of the pagan mysteries. Sir William Sinclair, the Prince of Orkney, was the true architect of the Rosslyn mystery, and his spirit still haunts the stones of the chapel that he built. The craft of stonemasonry, which reached its apogee in the building of the great Gothic cathedrals, is the fundamental context for understanding Rosslyn Chapel. The medieval masons were not just laborers. They were artists, engineers, and initiates of a secret tradition that had been passed down from master to apprentice for generations. The masons' guilds had their own rituals, their own symbols, and their own passwords, which were used to protect the secrets of their trade and to ensure the quality of their work. The masons who built Rosslyn were members of this craft, and they encoded their secret knowledge into the very stones of the chapel. The Rosslyn Chapel is a Masonic monument, a stone testament to the skills and the traditions of the medieval builders. The training of a medieval mason was a long and rigorous process, beginning in boyhood and lasting for many years. The apprentice would learn the basic skills of cutting and carving stone, under the watchful eye of a master. As he progressed, he would be initiated into the secrets of geometry, proportion, and the symbolic language of the craft. The work on a great building like Rosslyn was the culmination of a lifetime of training, a chance for the mason to demonstrate his mastery of the art. The masons who carved the Rosslyn stones were at the very top of their profession, and their work reflects a level of skill and artistry that has rarely been equaled. The symbolic language of the stonemasons, which is expressed in the carvings of Rosslyn, is a complex system of geometric, botanical, and figurative imagery. The square, the compass, the level, and the plumb rule, which are the basic tools of the mason's trade, are also the central symbols of the Masonic craft, representing the moral virtues of honesty, temperance, and justice. The pillars, which support the roof of the chapel, are symbols of strength and stability. The arches, which soar overhead, are symbols of the aspiration of the soul toward heaven. The carvings of leaves, flowers, and vines are a celebration of the beauty of the natural world, a reflection of the divine in the creation. The individual masons who carved the stones of Rosslyn are, for the most part, anonymous. Their names have been lost to history, but their personalities and their styles can be discerned in the stones. The different hands that carved the different sections of the chapel, the apprentice pillar, the green men, the biblical scenes, can be distinguished by their distinctive techniques and their artistic sensibilities. The chapel is a collective work of art, a symphony in stone that was composed by a team of master craftsmen, each one contributing his own unique voice to the whole. The anonymity of the masons is a reminder that the chapel was not built for personal glory, but for the glory of God and the craft. The organization of the Masonic craft in 15th century Scotland is a subject of debate among historians. The formal system of lodges and Grand Masters, which is characteristic of modern Freemasonry, did not yet exist. However, the masons who worked on the great building projects of the age were organized into highly skilled and secretive bodies, with their own customs and traditions. The Sinclairs, who were the hereditary Grand Masters of the Scottish lodges, according to a later tradition, were the patrons and protectors of the craft. The Rosslyn Chapel, which was built under the patronage of Sir William Sinclair, was a product of this close relationship between the noble patron and the Masonic Guild. The transmission of the Masonic tradition from the medieval stonemasons to the modern Freemasons is a process that is still not fully understood. The formal organization of Freemasonry, as it is known today, emerged in the 17th and 18th centuries, with the founding of the Grand Lodge of England in 1717. However, the roots of the craft lie deep in the medieval past, and the Rosslyn Chapel is a tangible link to that past. The symbols and the stories that are found in the carvings of Rosslyn are echoed in the rituals and the lectures of the modern Masonic Lodge. The chapel, in a very real sense, is a Masonic time capsule, a stone record of the ancient origins of the craft. The role of the apprentice in the Masonic tradition, which is symbolized by the apprentice pillar at Rosslyn, is a central part of the craft's identity. The apprentice is the beginner, the learner who must pass through a period of trial and instruction before he can become a master. The legend of the murdered apprentice, which is associated with the pillar, is a parable about the value of skill, the danger of pride, and the supreme importance of secrecy. The apprentice, in the Masonic tradition, is a symbol of the soul, which must be shaped and polished before it can be fit to enter the celestial lodge above. The restoration of Rosslyn Chapel in the 19th century, which was undertaken by the Edinburgh architect David Bryce under the patronage of the 4th Earl of Rosslyn, is a pivotal and deeply controversial chapter in the building's history. By the middle of the 19th century, the chapel was in a state of serious disrepair. The roof, which had been stripped of its original lead, was leaking. The stonework, which had been exposed to the harsh Scottish weather for over 400 years, was crumbling. The interior, which had been plastered over during the Reformation, was obscured by layers of whitewash. The restoration, which began in 1861 and continued for several years, was a massive and necessary undertaking that saved the chapel from potential collapse. However, the methods and the philosophy of the Victorian restorers were very different from those of modern conservators, and their work has been the subject of intense criticism ever since. The Victorian philosophy of restoration, as exemplified by the architect Sir George Gilbert Scott and his contemporaries, was based on the idea of returning a building to a hypothetical state of original perfection. The restorers were not content to simply stabilize the building and prevent further decay. They wanted to recreate the building as they imagined it had looked when it was first built. This involved removing later additions, recarving worn or damaged stonework, and even adding new features that were deemed to be in keeping with the original style. The Rosslyn restoration, which was carried out under the supervision of David Bryce, was conducted in this spirit. The masons employed by Bryce recarved many of the worn carvings, replaced damaged stones, and added the baptistry, the organ loft, and the stained glass windows. The impact of the Victorian restoration on the authenticity of the Rosslyn carvings is the central question of the modern debate. The skeptics, who argue that the Maize and aloe carvings are Victorian additions, point to the restoration as the moment when these anomalies were introduced. They suggest that the original medieval carvings were either abstract foliage or damaged beyond recognition, and that the Victorian masons, working with a free hand, created the New World plants, either as a mistake or as a deliberate hoax. The believers, on the other hand, argue that the Victorian masons were skilled copyists who faithfully reproduced the original designs, even if they did not understand their meaning. The question of what is medieval and what is Victorian at Rosslyn is a puzzle that may never be definitively solved. The specific work of David Bryce at Rosslyn is documented in the archives of the Rosslyn Chapel Trust, and it reveals a complex picture of the restoration process. Bryce, who was a highly respected architect, was a master of the Scottish baronial style, and he was not a medieval specialist. His approach to Rosslyn was, by his own account, one of careful conservation, but he also made significant interventions. He replaced the roof, rebuilt the pinnacles, and recarved many of the exterior stones. The interior, which was his primary focus, was stripped of its plaster and whitewash, revealing the stone carvings beneath. The work was carried out by a team of skilled masons, but their instructions and their methods are not always clear. The restoration of Rosslyn is a classic example of the Victorians' ambiguous legacy, a blend of rescue and reconstruction. The carved heads that were added during the Victorian restoration are a particular point of contention. The south aisle of the chapel contains a row of carved heads, representing figures from Scottish and biblical history. These heads, which are crisp and sharp in their detail, are clearly the work of the 19th century masons. They are a vivid example of the Victorian aesthetic, which favored a more literal and less stylized form of representation than the medieval carvers. The presence of these modern heads alongside the medieval originals is a visual reminder of the two distinct periods of the chapel's construction, and it serves as a warning to those who would assume that everything at Rosslyn is ancient. The controversy over the restoration has had a profound impact on the modern approach to the conservation of Rosslyn. The Rosslyn Chapel Trust, which is now responsible for the building, has adopted a policy of minimal intervention. The focus is on stabilizing the structure, preventing further decay, and cleaning the stonework, rather than on restoring it to a hypothetical original state. The Trust's philosophy is that the marks of age and wear are part of the building's history, and that they should be preserved, not erased. The Victorian restoration, in its heavy-handedness, has taught a valuable lesson, that the best way to honor the past is to be honest about the present. The legacy of the 19th century restoration is, for better or worse, an integral part of the Rosslyn Chapel that we see today. The building is not a pure medieval artifact, it is a palimpsest, a document that has been written and rewritten over the centuries. The Victorian layer, with its new carvings, its stained glass, and its organ loft, is a part of the chapel's story, a reflection of the 19th century fascination with the medieval past. To strip away the Victorian additions would be to destroy a chapter of the chapel's history, a chapter that is as interesting, in its own way, as the medieval original. The specific carvings of the 7 deadly sins and the 7 virtues at Rosslyn offer a profound window into the moral universe of the chapel's builders. These carvings, located on the pillars of the nave, are a visual catechism, a lesson in Christian ethics that was designed to be understood by the literate and the illiterate alike. Each sin is personified as a monstrous figure, its face contorted in agony, its body twisted in a posture of suffering. Pride, the queen of the sins, is shown as a figure falling from a horse, a classic medieval image of the proud being brought low. Greed is depicted clutching a money bag, his eyes fixed on his treasure. Wrath is shown in a violent rage, his face a mask of anger. Envy is a figure with a serpent coiled around his heart. Lust is a figure embracing a demonic lover. Gluttony is a bloated figure vomiting his excess. Sloth is a figure sleeping, his hands idle. The 7 virtues, which are carved opposite the sins, are depicted as serene and beautiful figures, their hands raised in blessing or holding symbols of their virtue. Humility, the opposite of pride, is shown holding a lamb, the symbol of meekness. Charity holds a loaf of bread and a pitcher of water, feeding the hungry and the thirsty. Patience holds a shield, defending herself against the arrows of misfortune. Kindness tends to a wounded man. Chastity holds a lily, the symbol of purity. Temperance pours water from a jug, symbolizing the moderation of the passions. Diligence is shown at work, her hands busy with her tasks. The contrast between the ugliness of the sins and the beauty of the virtues is a powerful visual statement of the moral choice that confronts every human being. The medieval theology of the 7 deadly sins was a central framework for understanding the human condition and the path to salvation. The sins were not just isolated acts of wrongdoing, they were the root causes of all evil, the fundamental orientations of the soul away from God and toward the self. The process of confession and penance, which was a regular part of the medieval Christian life, involved an examination of conscience in relation to each of the sins. The carvings at Rosslyn, which depict the sins in such graphic detail, were a tool for this examination, a visual aid for the penitent who was preparing to confess his sins and seek absolution. The 7 virtues, which were the antidotes to the 7 sins, were the path of spiritual growth and moral perfection. The cultivation of the virtues was the life's work of the Christian, a process of transforming the soul into a fit dwelling place for the Holy Spirit. The carvings of the virtues at Rosslyn, with their serene and beautiful faces, are a model for the faithful, a vision of the soul that has been purified and made whole. The virtues are the goal of the spiritual life, the destination of the human journey. The placement of the sin and virtue carvings on the pillars of the nave is symbolically significant. The nave is the main body of the church, where the congregation gathers for worship. The pillars, which support the roof, are a symbol of the church itself, the community of the faithful. The sins and the virtues, which are carved on the pillars, are a reminder that the struggle between good and evil takes place within the heart of each member of the community. The church is not a place of escape from the world, but a field of battle, where the forces of light and darkness are engaged in a perpetual conflict. The influence of the morality play, a popular form of medieval drama, is evident in the Rosslyn carvings. The morality plays, which were performed in the streets and the churchyards, depicted the struggle between the virtues and the vices for the soul of a human being. The plays were a vivid and entertaining way of teaching the Christian faith, and their characters and their stories were deeply embedded in the medieval imagination. The Rosslyn carvings, with their personified sins and virtues, are a stone version of a morality play, a frozen drama that is enacted every day in the life of the chapel. The restoration of the sin and virtue carvings during the Victorian period has, once again, raised questions of authenticity. The carvings were badly worn after centuries of exposure, and the Victorian masons recarved many of the details. The faces, in particular, which are so expressive and so vital, are largely the work of the 19th century. The question of whether the original medieval carvings were equally expressive, or whether they were more stylized and less naturalistic, is a matter of speculation. The Rosslyn that we see today is a collaboration between the medieval and the Victorian, a dialogue between two different ages of faith. The astronomical and astrological symbolism of Rosslyn Chapel is a dimension of the building that has only recently begun to be fully appreciated. The ceiling of the chapel, which is covered with hundreds of carved stars, has been identified as a celestial map, a representation of the heavens at a particular moment in time. The positions of the stars, the phases of the moon, and the signs of the zodiac are all thought to be encoded in the stone, forming a complex astrological message. The Rosslyn Chapel, in this reading, is an observatory, a place where the movements of the heavens could be studied and their symbolic meanings interpreted. The builders of the chapel were not just architects and masons. They were astronomers and astrologers, initiates of a tradition that saw the cosmos as a harmonious, interconnected whole. The specific alignment of Rosslyn Chapel, which is oriented to the east, the direction of the rising sun, is a fundamental aspect of its astronomical symbolism. The orientation of churches to the east is a universal Christian practice, symbolizing the resurrection of Christ and the anticipation of his second coming from the east. But the alignment of Rosslyn is not just a general orientation, it is a precise one, which allows the light of the rising sun to penetrate the chapel on specific days of the year. The alignment has been studied by archaeoastronomers, who have discovered that the chapel is aligned to the sunrise on the feast of St. Matthew, the patron saint of the chapel, which falls on September 21st. The star carvings on the ceiling of the Lady Chapel are not arranged in a random pattern. They have been shown to correspond to the positions of the stars in the constellation of Orion, the Hunter, as it would have appeared in the sky in the mid-15th century. Orion, which is one of the most prominent and recognizable constellations in the night sky, has a rich mythological and symbolic history. In Greek mythology, Orion was a giant hunter who was placed among the stars by Zeus. In the biblical tradition, Orion is mentioned in the Book of Job as a symbol of the power and majesty of God. The presence of Orion on the Rosslyn ceiling is a reminder of the ancient belief that the stars were a divine script, a message from the Creator that could be read by those who had the knowledge. The zodiacal symbolism of Rosslyn is expressed through the carvings of the 12 signs of the zodiac, which are located on the arches of the chapel. The signs Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces are depicted in their traditional medieval forms. The zodiac, which was inherited from the ancient Babylonians and Greeks, was an integral part of the medieval worldview. The signs were associated with the months of the year, the humors of the body, and the stages of human life. The presence of the zodiac at Rosslyn is a sign of the chapel's integration into the cosmic order, a recognition that the human microcosm is a reflection of the divine macrocosm. The sun and the moon, which are the two great lights of the sky, are also represented in the Rosslyn carvings. The sun, which is a symbol of Christ, the light of the world, is carved on several of the pillars. The moon, which is a symbol of the Virgin Mary, the Mother of God, is also present. The cycle of the sun and the moon, which governs the seasons and the tides, is a symbol of the order and the harmony of the creation. The Rosslyn Chapel, in its astronomical symbolism, is a celebration of the divine intelligence that has ordered the universe and that guides the destinies of all things. The astrological meaning of the Rosslyn carvings has been interpreted in a variety of ways. Some researchers have argued that the chapel's alignment and its star carvings are a prophecy of a future cosmic event, such as the return of a comet or the dawning of a new astrological age. Others have argued that the astrological symbolism is a guide to the process of spiritual transformation, a map of the inner heavens that the soul must traverse on its journey to God. The Rosslyn Chapel, in its astrological dimension, is a book of the stars, a guide to the cosmos and to the soul. The medieval science of astrology, which was closely allied with astronomy and medicine, was a highly sophisticated and intellectually demanding discipline. The astrologer, who studied the movements of the planets and their influence on human affairs, was a respected figure in the medieval courts and universities. The builders of Rosslyn, who were knowledgeable in the science of the stars, were part of this intellectual tradition. The chapel, which is a monument to their learning, is a reminder that the medieval mind was not a dark and superstitious void, but a rich and complex cosmos of knowledge and faith. The personal stories of the individuals who have been captivated by Rosslyn Chapel, who have dedicated their lives to studying its mysteries, are a testament to the building's enduring power. The story of Thomas and Stuart Mitchell, the Edinburgh music teacher, and his son who decoded the Rosslyn motet, is a particularly inspiring example. The Mitchells were not professional historians or musicologists. They were simply two men who were fascinated by a puzzle. They spent 2 years of their lives, working in their spare time, analyzing the patterns on the music boxes and trying to translate them into a musical score. Their discovery, which was announced in 2007, was a sensation, and it brought the chapel to the attention of a new generation of seekers. The Mitchell story is a reminder that the secrets of Rosslyn are accessible to anyone who has the patience, the curiosity, and the passion to seek them. The work of the late Dr. John Higgett, a brilliant art historian who dedicated his career to the study of Rosslyn, is a more scholarly, but equally passionate, example. Higgett, who was a professor at the University of Edinburgh, spent decades studying the chapel's carvings, painstakingly documenting and analyzing every detail. His book, The Rosslyn Chapel, A Guide to the Sculpture, which was published in 2011, is the definitive work on the subject, a meticulous catalogue of the chapel's iconography. Higgett's work has provided a solid foundation for all subsequent research, and his commitment to the truth, even when it conflicted with the legends, is a model of scholarly integrity. The contributions of Robert L. D. Cooper, the former curator of the Grand Lodge of Scotland Museum, have been essential in separating the Masonic myths from the historical reality of Rosslyn. Cooper, who is a Freemason himself, has been a tireless and fearless critic of the wilder speculations that have grown up around the chapel. His book, The Rosslyn Hoax, which was published in 2006, is a thorough and rigorous debunking of many of the claims that have been made about the chapel's Templar and Masonic connections. Cooper's work, while often controversial among believers, has been invaluable in raising the standard of evidence, and in bringing a dose of healthy skepticism to the debate. The role of the Earls of Rosslyn, the Sinclair family, in preserving and protecting the chapel for over 500 years is a story of quiet and persistent dedication. The family, which has endured political turmoil, financial hardship, and the relentless pressure of public curiosity, has remained steadfast in its commitment to the chapel. The current Earl, Peter St. Clair Erskine, the 7th Earl of Rosslyn, has been a wise and diplomatic steward of the building, navigating the challenges of the Da Vinci Code era with grace and skill. The Sinclair family, who are the true guardians of the Rosslyn mystery, deserve the gratitude of all who love the chapel. The visitors who have made the pilgrimage to Rosslyn, from the medieval peasants to the modern tourists, are an essential part of the chapel's story. The millions of people who have walked through the west door, who have gazed at the apprentice pillar, who have pondered the Green Man, have all contributed to the building's mystique. Each visitor brings their own questions, their own beliefs, and their own experiences, and they leave the chapel changed in some small way. The Rosslyn Chapel is not just a building, it is a living, breathing community of seekers, a fellowship of the quest that spans the centuries. The artists and writers who have been inspired by Rosslyn, from Sir Walter Scott to Dan Brown, have been the conduits through which the chapel's magic has been transmitted to the wider world. Scott's poem The Lay of the Last Minstrel, which is set in Rosslyn Glen, captured the romantic spirit of the place and introduced it to a generation of readers. Brown's The Da Vinci Code, which is a work of fiction, reimagined the chapel as the final resting place of the Grail, and in doing so, made it a global icon. The artists and writers, in their various ways, have been the prophets of Rosslyn, the ones who have seen its significance and have proclaimed it to the world. The future of Rosslyn Chapel is in the hands of all of us who love it. The building, which has stood for over 550 years, is facing the challenges of a new era, climate change, mass tourism, and the erosion of the spiritual values that gave it birth. The Rosslyn Chapel Trust, which is responsible for its care, will need the support of the global community to ensure that it survives for another 5 centuries. The chapel, which has endured so much, will endure this too. Its stones, which have been silent for so long, will continue to speak to those who have the ears to hear. The detailed geometry of Rosslyn Chapel, particularly the use of the golden ratio and other sacred proportions, has been a subject of intense study for mathematicians and esoteric researchers. The golden ratio, which is approximately 1.618, is a mathematical proportion that is found throughout nature, in the spiral of a nautilus shell, the branching of a tree, and the proportions of the human body. It was used by the ancient Egyptians in the construction of the pyramids, and by the Greeks in the design of the Parthenon. The golden ratio was believed to be a divine proportion, a reflection of the harmony and the order of the cosmos. The presence of the golden ratio in the Rosslyn Chapel, if it can be demonstrated, would be a sign that the builders were initiates of a sacred mathematical tradition. The measurements of Rosslyn Chapel have been analyzed by a number of researchers, who have claimed to have found the golden ratio in the dimensions of the building, the spacing of the pillars, and the proportions of the arches. The length of the chapel, divided by its width, is said to approximate the golden ratio. The height of the pillars, in relation to the width of the nave, also follows the divine proportion. These claims are controversial, and skeptics argue that the golden ratio can be found in almost any building if one looks hard enough. However, the consistency and the precision of the geometric patterns at Rosslyn suggest that the builders were consciously employing a system of sacred geometry. The use of sacred geometry in the design of medieval cathedrals was a common practice. The cathedrals of Chartres, Notre Dame, and Salisbury were all designed according to precise geometric principles, which were based on the belief that the order of the material world was a reflection of the order of the divine mind. The architects and masons who built these cathedrals were learned in the liberal arts, particularly geometry, which was considered to be the key to understanding the nature of God. The Rosslyn Chapel, which is a product of the same intellectual tradition, is a geometric prayer, a stone meditation on the beauty and the order of the creation. The floor plan of Rosslyn, which is a rectangle with a projecting eastern apse, is a deceptively simple form that conceals a complex geometric armature. The use of the ad quadratum and ad triangulum methods, which were the standard techniques of medieval architects, is evident in the layout of the chapel. The ad quadratum method, which is based on the square and its diagonals, was used to determine the proportions of the nave and the aisles. The ad triangulum method, which is based on the equilateral triangle, was used to determine the height of the vault and the pitch of the roof. The Rosslyn Chapel, in its geometric perfection, is a testament to the intellectual sophistication of the medieval builders. The symbolic meaning of the circle, the square, and the triangle in the esoteric tradition is relevant to the Rosslyn geometry. The circle is a symbol of the divine, the infinite, and the eternal. The square is a symbol of the material world, the earth, and the four elements. The triangle is a symbol of the Trinity, the unity of the three persons in one God. The combination of these three shapes in the design of the chapel is a representation of the union of the divine and the human, the spiritual and the material, the one and the many. The Rosslyn Chapel, in its geometric symbolism, is a microcosm of the universe. The role of the mason's mark, the individual symbol that was carved by each mason on his work, is another aspect of the chapel's geometry. The marks, which are simple geometric shapes, are found on many of the stones. They were used to identify the work of a particular mason for the purposes of payment, but they also had a symbolic significance. The mark was a signature, a personal seal that the mason left on his work, a sign of his pride in his craft and his membership in the guild. The mason's marks at Rosslyn are a reminder of the individual human beings who built the chapel, stone by stone. The geometric analysis of Rosslyn Chapel is an ongoing project, and new discoveries are being made all the time. The use of computer modeling and digital scanning has allowed researchers to explore the geometry of the building in ways that were never before possible. The Rosslyn Chapel, which was built with the simplest of tools, is now being studied with the most advanced technology of the 21st century. The mystery of its geometry is slowly being revealed, but the sense of wonder that it inspires remains undiminished. The influence of Celtic art and mythology on the carvings of Rosslyn Chapel is a rich and often overlooked aspect of the building's iconography. The intricate, interlacing patterns that cover the pillars and arches, the fantastical animals that writhe and coil among the leaves, and the ubiquitous presence of the Green Man are all echoes of the ancient Celtic traditions that had flourished in Scotland for 1,000 years before the arrival of Christianity. The builders of Rosslyn, who were working in a land that was still deeply imbued with the spirit of the Celts, drew on this native artistic tradition, fusing it with the Christian and esoteric imagery that they had inherited from the continent. The Rosslyn Chapel is a unique blend of the Celtic and the Gothic, a stone tapestry that weaves together the old gods and the new. The Celtic art of the early medieval period, which is exemplified by the Book of Kells and the high crosses of Iona, is characterized by a love of intricate, swirling patterns, stylized animals, and abstract geometric forms. The Celtic artists, who were often monks and scribes, created works of astonishing complexity and beauty, in which every surface was covered with a dense web of ornament. The influence of this art can be seen at Rosslyn in the interlacing vines and the serpentine creatures that twist around the pillars. The Celtic style, with its emphasis on movement and energy, is a counterpoint to the more static and formal style of the Gothic, creating a dynamic and vibrant visual experience. The Green Man, as we have noted, is a figure that has deep roots in the pre-Christian religions of Europe. In the Celtic tradition, the Green Man is often associated with the god Cernunnos, the horned god of the forest, the lord of the animals and the wild places. Cernunnos, who is often depicted with antlers on his head and a torque around his neck, is a symbol of the life force, the untamed power of nature, and the cycle of death and rebirth. The Green Men of Rosslyn, with their foliate faces and their wild, staring eyes, are the descendants of this ancient deity, a reminder that the old gods had not been forgotten, but had been absorbed into the new Christian faith. The serpent and the dragon, which appear frequently in the Rosslyn carvings, are also figures from the Celtic mythos. In the pre-Christian world, the serpent was a symbol of wisdom, healing, and the chthonic powers of the earth. The dragon, a later development of the serpent myth, was a guardian of treasure and a symbol of sovereignty. The Celtic bards told stories of dragons that guarded the entrances to the underworld, and of heroes who overcame these monsters to win a great prize. The dragons at Rosslyn, which are carved on the apprentice pillar and elsewhere, are the guardians of the chapel's secrets, the eternal sentinels that protect the sacred treasure. The fusion of Celtic and Christian imagery at Rosslyn is not a sign of paganism, but a sign of the universality of the Christian message. The early Christian missionaries to Scotland, such as Street Columba, had understood that the best way to convert the Celtic peoples was not to destroy their culture, but to baptize it, to find the seeds of the divine in the old stories and to bring them to fulfillment in the light of Christ. The Rosslyn Chapel, which was built in this spirit of synthesis, is a monument to the belief that all truth is God's truth, and that the wisdom of the ancients is not an enemy of the faith, but a precursor and a companion. The Celtic concept of thin places, where the veil between the material and the spiritual worlds is believed to be especially porous, is relevant to the Rosslyn Chapel. The chapel, which was built on a site that may have been sacred in pre-Christian times, is a thin place, a location where the presence of the divine can be felt with particular intensity. The thousands of visitors who come to Rosslyn each year, many of whom are not conventionally religious, often speak of a sense of peace, of awe, of a palpable spiritual energy that pervades the building. The Rosslyn Chapel is a place where the Celtic spirit and the Christian faith are still alive and intertwined. The legacy of the Celtic tradition is woven into the very fabric of Scottish identity, and Rosslyn is a powerful expression of that identity. The chapel, with its unique blend of the native and the foreign, the ancient and the medieval, is a symbol of the Scottish nation itself, a people who have absorbed wave after wave of invaders and have emerged with their culture and their spirit intact. The Rosslyn Chapel is a celebration of the Celtic soul, a soul that is wild, creative, and deeply spiritual. The Rosslyn Chapel in the context of the wider Scottish Reformation and the subsequent Covenanting period is a story of survival against the odds. The Scottish Reformation, which was formally established in 1560, swept away the medieval church, its monasteries, its relics, and its elaborate ritual. The Calvinist reformers, led by John Knox, were deeply suspicious of imagery, which they saw as a form of idolatry. The The great abbeys and cathedrals were stripped of their altars, their statues, and their stained glass. The Rosslyn Chapel, which was a private family chapel, was not directly targeted by the reformers, but its future was uncertain. The Sinclairs, who remained loyal to their Catholic faith, were forced to worship in secret, and the chapel fell into disuse. The whitewashing of the Rosslyn interior, which took place during the Reformation or in the years that followed, was a deliberate act of iconoclasm. The reformers covered the carvings with a layer of whitewash, a symbolic act of purification that erased the idolatrous images from sight. The whitewash, which remained in place for centuries, protected the carvings from further damage, but it also hid them from view, ensuring that their message would be forgotten. The stripping of the altars and the removal of the sacred vessels completed the desacralization of the building. The Rosslyn Chapel, which had been a jewel box of color and light, was reduced to a bare, whitewashed shell. The Sinclair family, during this long period of persecution, held on to their faith and their chapel. They could not worship publicly in the Catholic rite, but they could still gather in the chapel for private prayer and devotion. The crypt, which was sealed and hidden, became the symbolic heart of the family's faith, a secret sanctuary where the memory of the old religion was preserved. The Sinclairs, who had been the protectors of the Templars, were now the protectors of the Catholic tradition in a land that had become hostile to it. The Rosslyn Chapel, in its whitewashed silence, was a symbol of resistance. The Jacobite rebellions of the 18th century, which were an attempt to restore the Catholic Stuart dynasty to the British throne, were the last great military expression of the Sinclair family's faith. The Sinclairs, who were staunch Jacobites, fought and died for the cause of the exiled king. The failure of the Jacobite cause at the Battle of Culloden in 1746 was a devastating blow to the family, and it marked the final end of their political and military power. The Rosslyn Chapel, which had been the scene of so many clandestine masses, was now a relic of a lost world. The rediscovery of Rosslyn by the Romantics in the late 18th and early 19th centuries was the beginning of a new chapter in the chapel's history. The writers and artists of the Romantic movement, who were fascinated by the medieval past and the beauty of ruins, were drawn to Rosslyn's wild and mysterious charm. Sir Walter Scott, who was a frequent visitor, celebrated the chapel in his poetry and his novels. The Victorians, who followed the Romantics, were determined to restore the chapel to its original glory. The restoration of the 1860s, which we have discussed, was the culmination of this newfound appreciation for the medieval heritage. The modern era has seen Rosslyn Chapel emerge from the shadows of history and take its place as one of the most famous and beloved buildings in the world. The chapel, which was once a secret sanctuary for a persecuted faith, is now a global icon, a place of pilgrimage for millions. The Sinclair family, who have been the guardians of the chapel for over 500 years, have shared their treasure with the world. The Rosslyn Chapel, in its triumph over persecution, neglect, and decay, is a symbol of the endurance of faith and the power of beauty. The spiritual continuity of Rosslyn, from the medieval Catholic Church to the present-day Scottish Episcopal Church, is a remarkable story. The chapel, which was built for the celebration of the Latin Mass, is now used for the Anglican liturgy. The Eucharist, which is the central act of Christian worship, is still celebrated at the altar. The same prayers that were offered by the medieval canons are still offered today. The Rosslyn Chapel, despite all the changes and the upheavals of history, is still a living church, a place where the sacred is encountered and the divine is worshipped. The enigmatic carvings of the Master of the Works and other specific figures at Rosslyn have been the subject of particular scrutiny by those seeking to identify the individual masons and their patron. One of the most intriguing is a carving on the south wall of the chapel that depicts a man holding a mallet and a chisel, the tools of a mason. He is often identified as the master mason who was responsible for the overall design and execution of the building. The figure is life-sized and highly detailed, with a serious, contemplative expression on his face. He gazes out at the visitor with an air of quiet authority, a silent sentinel who has watched over the chapel for over 5 centuries. The identity of this man is unknown, but his presence is a powerful reminder of the human hands and the human minds that created the Rosslyn miracle. Another specific carving that has drawn attention is the figure of a knight in full armor, lying on a tomb with his hands clasped in prayer, known as the Knight of the Tomb. This figure is located in the Lady Chapel, and he is believed to represent Sir William Sinclair, the builder of the chapel, or perhaps a Templar ancestor. The knight's armor is rendered in meticulous detail, showing the plates, the rivets, and the chain mail. His face is peaceful, as if he is sleeping, waiting for the final judgment. The Knight of the Tomb is a poignant image of faith and mortality, a memento mori that speaks of the hope of the resurrection. The carved heads that represent the various figures of the contemporary 15th century world, the king, the queen, the bishop, the nobleman, are a gallery of medieval life. These heads, which are located on the arches and the pillars, are not idealized portraits. They are realistic depictions of individual human beings, with their own distinctive features and expressions. They are a reminder that the chapel was built by and for a living community, a community that was composed of real people with real faces. The carved heads are a tribute to the humanity of the medieval world, a world that was as diverse and as complex as our own. The figure of the Sheela na gig, which is carved on the outside wall of the chapel, is one of the most shocking and most mysterious images in the whole of medieval art. The Sheela na gig is a crude carving of a female figure who is squatting and holding her vulva open. The purpose of these figures, which are found on churches across Europe, is a subject of intense debate. Some scholars argue that they are fertility symbols, remnants of a pre-Christian goddess cult. Others argue that they are warnings against the sin of lust. Whatever their original meaning, the Sheela na gig at Rosslyn is a powerful and disturbing image, a reminder of the raw, earthly power of the feminine that was both feared and revered by the medieval church. The angelic figures that are carved throughout the chapel, playing musical instruments, holding scrolls, or simply gazing upward, are a visual representation of the celestial hierarchy. The angels, who are the messengers of God and the guardians of the human soul, were a central part of the medieval worldview. The Rosslyn angels, with their serene faces and their graceful poses, are a reminder of the presence of the divine in the world, a promise that we are not alone in our earthly struggles. The angels are the silent companions of the visitor, the unseen witnesses to the sacred rites. The animals that are carved at Rosslyn, both real and mythical, are another rich source of symbolism. The dog, which is a symbol of fidelity, is carved lying at the feet of the Knight of the Tomb. The lion, which is a symbol of strength and courage, appears on several of the pillars. The unicorn, which is a mythical creature that was a symbol of purity and Christ, is depicted on the arches. The animals of Rosslyn are a reminder of the medieval belief that the natural world was a book written by God, in which every creature had a moral and a spiritual meaning. The overall effect of the Rosslyn carvings is one of overwhelming abundance, a horror vacui, a fear of empty spaces, that is characteristic of the late Gothic style. Every surface, every pillar, every arch is covered with imagery, as if the masons were afraid to leave a single stone blank. This abundance is a sign of the generosity of the Creator, who has filled the world with wonders, and it is a sign of the devotion of the builders, who poured their hearts and their souls into every detail. The Rosslyn Chapel is a stone hymn of praise, a visual Te Deum that celebrates the glory of God and the beauty of the creation. The enduring mystery of the Rosslyn Chapel crypt continues to be the single most tantalizing aspect of the entire building. For over 500 years, the vault beneath the chapel has remained sealed, its contents unknown and its secrets undisturbed. The persistence of the legends, that the crypt contains the Holy Grail, the Ark of the Covenant, the mummified head of Jesus Christ, or the lost scrolls of the Temple of Solomon, is a testament to the power of the Rosslyn myth. The crypt is the blank screen onto which the world has projected its deepest hopes and its most profound fears. It is the ultimate locked room, the final mystery of a building that is full of mysteries. The attempts to investigate the crypt using non-invasive technology have, so far, been inconclusive. Ground-penetrating radar surveys have revealed anomalies beneath the floor of the chapel, indicating the presence of cavities and structures that could be the crypt. However, the technology cannot distinguish between a burial vault, a natural feature, or a hidden chamber. The resolution of the scans has not been sufficient to provide a detailed picture of what lies beneath. A full investigation, using more advanced techniques, has been proposed but has not been authorized by the Sinclair family. The reasons for the Sinclair family's continued refusal to open the crypt are complex and multifaceted. The official reason, which is entirely valid, is the need to protect the structural integrity of the ancient building and to respect the sanctity of the family burials. The crypt is the resting place of the Sinclair ancestors, and disturbing their remains would be a violation of a sacred trust. The family has a deep and abiding respect for the dead, and they are determined to protect their final resting place from the curiosity of the living. There is, however, also a pragmatic reason for keeping the crypt sealed. The mystery is, in itself, a valuable asset. The legends of the Grail and the Ark are the source of the chapel's global fame, and they are the reason why millions of visitors come to Rosslyn each year. To open the crypt and find it empty, or to find only the mundane remains of the Sinclair lords, would be to destroy the mystery, to kill the goose that lays the golden egg. The Sinclair family, in their wisdom, have chosen to preserve the legend, to let the mystery live. The symbolic meaning of the sealed crypt is, perhaps, more important than its literal contents. The crypt is a symbol of the hidden, the unknown, the sacred center that lies at the heart of all things. It is the Holy of Holies, the place where the divine presence dwells, a place that is set apart from the profane world. The crypt is the silent heart of Rosslyn, a place of darkness and mystery that is the source of the chapel's spiritual power. The quest for the Grail is, ultimately, a quest for the inner center, the hidden chamber of the soul where God resides. The tradition of the underground chamber is a universal archetype, found in the myths and the religions of many cultures. The cave, the crypt, the underworld is the place of initiation, the place where the hero must ascend to face his deepest fears and to claim his greatest reward. The Rosslyn crypt is this archetypal chamber, a place of darkness and death that is also a place of rebirth and transformation. The pilgrim who comes to Rosslyn is invited to make this inner descent, to confront the mystery of his own mortality, and to seek the hidden treasure of the soul. The future of the Rosslyn crypt is a question that will eventually be answered. The advance of technology, or the changing attitudes of the Sinclair family, may one day lead to the opening of the vault. When that day comes, the world will be watching. The contents of the crypt may be a profound revelation, or they may be a mundane disappointment. But the search, the quest, the centuries of waiting and wondering, will have been, in themselves, a form of worship. The Rosslyn crypt is a monument to the human capacity for faith, for hope, and for the unending search for the sacred. The relationship between Rosslyn Chapel and the medieval concept of the New Jerusalem is a profound and overarching theme that ties together many of the building's symbolic strands. The New Jerusalem, as described in the Book of Revelation, is the heavenly city that will descend from heaven at the end of time, the perfect dwelling place of God and the redeemed. It is a city of gold and precious stones, a city of light and harmony, a city where there is no more suffering or death. The medieval cathedral was designed to be a foretaste of this heavenly city, a piece of heaven brought down to earth. The Rosslyn Chapel, in its perfection, its beauty, and its mystery, was intended to be a model of the New Jerusalem, a visible sign of the invisible reality. The Temple of Solomon, which was the dwelling place of God on earth in the Old Testament, was the prefiguration of the New Jerusalem. The temple, with its Holy of Holies containing the Ark of the Covenant, was the center of the world, the place where heaven and earth met. The Rosslyn Chapel, which is a replica of the temple in its floor plan, is a new temple, a new dwelling place for the divine presence. The sealed crypt, which is the Holy of Holies of the chapel, is the place where the Ark of the New Covenant, the Grail, the bloodline, the lost wisdom, is believed to rest. The Rosslyn Chapel is a temple for a new age, a temple that was built in a distant land by the heirs of the ancient priests. The stone of Rosslyn, which is a fine-grained sandstone, is itself a symbol of the New Jerusalem. The New Jerusalem, in the Book of Revelation, is built of precious stones, jasper, sapphire, and emerald. The Rosslyn Chapel, which is built of a humble Scottish stone, is transformed by the art of the masons into a building that shines with an inner light. The carvings, which cover every surface, transform the stone into a tapestry of sacred imagery, a visual representation of the glory of the heavenly city. The Rosslyn Chapel is a stone that has been made precious by the love and the skill of its builders. The light that fills Rosslyn Chapel, through the stained glass windows, is a symbol of the divine light that illuminates the New Jerusalem. The New Jerusalem, in the book of Revelation, has no need of the sun or the moon, for the glory of God gives it light. The Rosslyn Chapel, when it was first built, would have been bathed in the colored light of the stained glass, creating an atmosphere of otherworldly beauty. The light was a sign of the presence of God, a visible manifestation of the invisible grace. The modern visitor, who sees the chapel in the cold, clear light of the Scottish day, can only imagine the splendor of the original. The music of Rosslyn, which was encoded in the music boxes and which is now sung in the chapel, is a foretaste of the music of the New Jerusalem. The book of Revelation describes the heavenly city as being filled with the sound of harps and the singing of a new song. The Rosslyn motet, which is a prayer for mercy, is an echo of that heavenly music, a fragment of the eternal harmony that has been frozen in stone and released into the air. The music of Rosslyn is a reminder that the sacred is not silent, but is constantly singing, constantly creating, constantly praising. The community that gathers at Rosslyn, both the living and the dead, is a model of the communion of the saints in the New Jerusalem. The Sinclair lords who are buried in the crypt, the masons who built the walls, the priests who have celebrated the Mass, and the millions of pilgrims who have come to pray are all part of the one family of God. The Rosslyn Chapel is a place where the living and the dead are united, a place where the past, the present, and the future are all gathered into a single, eternal moment. The Rosslyn Chapel is the New Jerusalem, not in its physical reality, but in its spiritual significance. The quest for the Rosslyn mystery is, ultimately, a quest for the New Jerusalem, a quest for the city of peace and justice that is the goal of all human longing. The Grail, the Ark, the Lost Scrolls are all symbols of this ultimate hope. The Rosslyn Chapel, in its beauty and its mystery, is a sign that the New Jerusalem is not just a distant dream, but a reality that is already present, hidden in the heart of the world, waiting to be revealed. The stones of Rosslyn are preaching a silent sermon on the hope of the world to come. The digital age has brought a new dimension to the quest for the Rosslyn secrets, creating a global, interconnected community of researchers, enthusiasts, and seekers who are united by their fascination with the chapel. The internet has democratized the search, allowing anyone with a computer and a passion to participate in the decoding of the stone messages. Online forums, dedicated websites, and social media groups are filled with detailed analyses of the carvings, theories about the crypt, and debates about the historical evidence. The Rosslyn Chapel, which was once a secret known only to a few, is now a public mystery, a puzzle that is being worked on by thousands of minds around the world. The use of digital photography and 3D scanning has revolutionized the study of the Rosslyn carvings. High-resolution images and virtual models allow researchers to examine the details of the stonework with a precision that was never before possible. The carvings can be viewed from any angle, zoomed into the microscopic level, and analyzed using software that can detect patterns and anomalies. The digital record of Rosslyn is a permanent archive that will survive the inevitable decay of the physical building, ensuring that its message is preserved for future generations. The online debate over the authenticity of the Maize and aloe carvings, for example, has been greatly enriched by the availability of high-quality images. Participants in the debate can compare the Rosslyn carvings with photographs of real maize cobs and aloe plants, with medieval European carvings of wheat and barley, and with other botanical illustrations from the 15th century. The digital evidence has not resolved the dispute, but it has raised the level of the discussion and has made the arguments on both sides more accessible to the public. The phenomenon of digital pilgrimage to Rosslyn, where people who cannot travel to Scotland can experience the chapel through virtual tours and online resources, is a new form of engagement with the sacred site. The Rosslyn Chapel Trust's website offers a virtual tour that allows visitors to explore the interior of the building, to zoom in on the carvings, and to read about the history and the symbolism. This virtual experience, while not a substitute for the physical presence, is a way of making the chapel accessible to a global audience, of spreading its message to the far corners of the earth. The global community of Rosslyn seekers, which is connected by the internet, is a modern manifestation of the ancient fellowship of the quest. The individuals who share their research, their theories, and their personal experiences online are the inheritors of the tradition of the Grail Knights, the Templars, and the Freemasons. They are a community of the like-minded, bound together by a shared love of mystery and a shared desire for truth. The digital age has created a new form of secret society, a society that is open to all who have the curiosity and the passion to seek. The future of the Rosslyn mystery in the digital age is full of possibilities. The application of artificial intelligence and machine learning to the analysis of the carvings may reveal patterns and connections that have been invisible to human observers. The development of new forms of non-invasive subsurface imaging may finally reveal the contents of the sealed crypt. The global conversation about Rosslyn, which is happening in real time on the internet, may generate new insights and new interpretations that will deepen our understanding of the chapel. The Rosslyn Chapel, which was built in a pre-literate age, is now at the center of a global, digital conversation. The messages in the stone, which were carved for a world that communicated through images and symbols, are now being decoded by a world that communicates through pixels and data. The chapel, which has survived the Reformation, the Restoration, and the rise of mass tourism, is now facing the challenge of the digital revolution. And as it has always done, it is adapting, enduring, and continuing to inspire. The story of Rosslyn Chapel is, in the final analysis, the story of the human quest for meaning, a quest that has driven pilgrims to travel thousands of miles, artists to dedicate their lives, and knights to lay down their swords. The Rosslyn Chapel, in its silent, enduring beauty, is a monument to this quest, a stone testament to the belief that there is a hidden order behind the chaos of the world, a secret truth that is waiting to be revealed. The builders of Rosslyn, who were the heirs of the Templars and the masters of the Masonic craft, encoded their knowledge and their faith into the very stones of the chapel. They created a building that is a puzzle, a prayer, and a promise, a puzzle to be solved, a prayer to be offered, and a promise of a truth that would one day be fully known. We have journeyed together through the history, the architecture, the symbolism, and the legends of this most extraordinary building. We have examined the intricate carvings, from the apprentice pillar to the green man, from the dance of death to the mysterious Maize and aloe. We have explored the sealed crypt, the ultimate locked room of the Western esoteric tradition. We have listened to the Rosslyn motet, the stone music that was frozen in time. And we have traced the connections between the chapel, the Knights Templar, the Sinclair family, and the Masonic craft. The Rosslyn Chapel is a book of secrets, a stone library that has been waiting for centuries to be fully read. The meaning of Rosslyn, after all our exploration, remains a mystery. It is a building that refuses to be pinned down, a mystery that resists a final, definitive solution. The chapel is, at once, a Christian church, a Templar monument, a Masonic temple, and a pagan shrine. It is a work of art, a piece of music, a mathematical puzzle, and an astronomical observatory. It is a place of worship, a tourist attraction, and a pilgrimage site. The Rosslyn Chapel is all of these things, and none of them exclusively. Its genius lies in its ability to contain multitudes, to speak to different people in different ways, and to remain forever open to interpretation. The Rosslyn Chapel is a mirror that reflects the seeker. The devout Christian sees a beautiful church, a testament to the faith of the medieval Masons. The Templar enthusiast sees a secret commandery, a repository for the order's lost treasure. The Freemason sees a temple of initiation, a stone representation of the craft's ancient mysteries. The conspiracy theorist sees a cipher, a coded message that reveals the hidden history of the world. The artist sees a masterpiece, a symphony in stone. The chapel, in its infinite complexity, is all of these things, and more. It is a place where the imagination is set free, where the boundaries between the sacred and the profane, the historical and the mythical, are blurred and dissolved. The quest for the Rosslyn mystery is, ultimately, a quest for the self. The Grail, the Ark, the lost scrolls are all symbols of the inner treasure, the divine spark that lies hidden within each human soul. The Rosslyn Chapel, in its beauty and its silence, is an invitation to embark on this inner quest, to descend into the crypt of the heart, and to discover the treasure that has been waiting there all along. The chapel is not just a building, it is a map of the soul, a guide to the inner sanctuary where the divine presence dwells. The white-mantled Knights of the Temple, who fled to Scotland and who, according to legend, fought at Bannockburn, are the spiritual ancestors of all who seek the Rosslyn mystery. They were the guardians of the sacred, the keepers of the flame, and the martyrs of the faith. Their legacy is the Rosslyn Chapel, a building that they may have helped to inspire and that their heirs, the Sinclairs, built. The Templars, in their quest for the Holy Land and the Temple of Solomon, were the embodiment of the human search for the sacred. The Rosslyn Chapel is their monument, their stone testament to the enduring power of the quest. Before we part, I have a small but vital request. If this deep dive into the mysteries of Rosslyn Chapel has ignited your curiosity, please leave a like right now. It helps this video reach more history lovers, and we are marching toward our goal of 1,000 likes. Take a moment to subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell, so you never miss a new episode when we uncover another hidden chapter of our shared past. Your comments are the compass that guides our future explorations, so write down your theory below. What do you believe is hidden in the Rosslyn crypt? The Holy Grail? The Ark of the Covenant? Or something even more mysterious? Share this video with a friend who loves historical mysteries. Let's grow this community of seekers together. I hope you enjoyed this content, and I'll see you in the next video.